We're just regular people in a messed up world. Always rushing. Never breathing. We're not saints. Stray thoughts happen. Forget morals for a second. Let's talk profit. The off-key singing rattled inside a battered electric scooter. Not good, not dog-scaring bad either. The rider bobbed along under a flickering street lamp, pleased with his own rhythm. Ever seen the city at 1 a.m.? He thought. I see it every night after work. He figured this was his life. Born to hustle, die as a cog. Anonymous. Replaceable. Then the intersection ahead filled with a white wall of light. A truck horn rolled over him. Deep and mean like a bull turned up to 11. Light. Sound. Impact. He turned left on reflex and saw it. The ultimate ice-sky device. A very large truck. Metal hit metal. The scooter's battery popped like a firecracker and sprayed sparks. The truck kept going. Out on the industrial fringe, there were no cameras, no traffic, not even a decent dash cam. By the time an ambulance arrived, the clip was already viral. The fire died. What was left looked like a burnt rib cage of a scooter on the shoulder. In the seat, amid soot and bent frame, a single blackened smear. One last mark from man whose life ended without an audience. The only one who noticed later was his supervisor, angry he had missed 3 days and hadn't handed over the project files. A termination letter went to an empty apartment, mortgage still choking it for 30 years. Months later, the bank took the place, and the letter went into the trash. No one cared that the tenant had vanished. // system. Transferring consciousness // He opened his eyes. No scooter. No headlights. No truck. No windows, either. He was strapped into something like a high-end massage chair, padded on all sides. A curved, translucent panel hovered in front of his face, the only view out. Turning his head took effort, but his eyes worked. He was sealed in a small pod. Beyond the panel was darkness. Stars scattered like salt. Nighttime? He thought. A giant striped planet drifted past, a red storm staring like an eye. Jupiter, which made this not night but space. Real space. Rings and rocks slid by. It felt like a planetarium screen, only too crisp and way too close. He traced his last memory. The horn. The truck. The hit. So this was the sequel. He wriggled an arm free. The limb was soft and chubby, skin smooth like new plastic wrap. Not an overworked adult's arm. Not an adult's arm at all. What the reborn? Transmigrated? Possession? No extra memories. No cheat. No HUD. Just confusion. Judging by the view, this wasn't a fantasy world and probably not a sim. If that was Jupiter, then they were still in the solar system. Another planet glided past, wearing magnificent rings. Saturn, which meant the pod was heading sunward. Maybe toward Earth. No controls. No dashboard. No joystick. Either it flew itself or gravity did the driving. If it was the first, he might be going home. If it was the second, he might be going into the sun. Great. Reincarnated just to get cremated. He stopped looking for an exit. The pod was cramped and quiet. Nothing to press. Nothing to yell at. Maybe it was a space funeral. Old sea burials, but orbital. A space coffin? Or a scion pod? He smirked. If only he could check for a tail. He couldn't move enough to try. Dragon Ball was wild, he muttered. Send a baby to conquer Earth? That kid wouldn't conquer a bottle. The pod rolled. A blue planet filled the panel, half in shadow. The dark side glittered with lights. Artificial. Civilization. No cavemen. No witch trials. Modern. Satellites winked past as the pod began its dive. Flames licked the viewport. The hull sang with heat. Inside calm. No shaking. No crushing force. Whatever built this thing was ahead of Earth by a lot. Alien, or something uncomfortably close. Or it really was a coffin. Then who was he? He braced for Planet of the Apes. Please no monkey people. The pod cracked open to a blast of snow and a knot of men in white parkas shouting in rough Russian. They were somewhere remote. Frozen. Empty. He opened his mouth to greet them. Maybe a privet Tavarish. Wah. A baby's cry. Short limbs. Chubby body. Tiny lungs. Not just reincarnated. Reborn. As a baby. In Siberia. In a snowstorm. Fantastic. Do aliens have human rights? If they arrive in armadas and park cannons over our heads? Absolutely. We'd sprint to the treaty table and hand out immunity like candy. But one alien. Alone. No backup. Human rights? Not really. Lab rat privileges at best. That's how the one they labeled NLO Odin, UFO 1, ended up here. A sealed, windowless room buried under Siberian permafrost. No sun, no clock, no doors that open for him. The cell looked less like a prison and more like a Cold War biolab recovery ward. Sterile white walls, chrome fixtures wiped to a mirror shine. Bigger than a shoebox apartment he'd once mortgaged for 30 years, but empty. Featureless. Dead. Even the lights weren't his. Someone outside flipped them on and off. Wardrobe options. Naked or a crisp white gown shaped like a hospital smock crossed with a toddler's onesie. Mercifully closed in the back. As a newborn, he got formula. After weaning, it was gray nutrition paste. Bland, thin, never enough. He was always hungry. Not dying, just never full. The place was so clean, there wasn't a single roach to haunt. The only thing within reach was the toilet. He never stooped that low. He could flush. That was something. No clocks, no calendar. Time existed only as light cycles, and the maybe 3 meals that sometimes arrived. No seasons, no weather, no change in air. Always the same careful temperature, like nature had been deleted. And he never got sick. Not once. No colds, no fevers. But he wasn't well either, just underfed and exhausted, running on fumes. The white coats kept their distance. They only touched him to draw blood or perform exams, and even then they were all procedure and silence. The room was cleaned when he was out. Hide a crumb, and it vanished. Hide a note, and it vanished too. Dissected, probably. He stopped trying. At first he didn't get it. Wouldn't you talk to an alien? Ask questions? Then it clicked. He'd arrived as a baby. What intel could a baby give? How's the FDL drive, kid? ETA on the invasion. Diapers, pros and cons. He had no extra memories, no special knowledge. The only valuable things were his body and the pod that carried him. No wonder they treated him like a bomb. Everyone wore hazmat suits near him. Observers stayed behind glass. Once, he considered shouting, "I come in peace," raised under the red flag. But even that was risky. If he sounded too earth-savvy, they'd ask the worst question, "How do you know that?" And the next stop is an autopsy table. So he played dumb. Passive. Obedient. He wasn't a revolutionary anyway. He'd been a desk drone in his last life, burned out from 996-007, paid in peanuts, feelings on mute. The fantasy of a rich savior never arrived. He'd mostly endured. Now there were no games, no anime, no memes, no street food, no soda, no phone, no music, no escape. He figured he'd grow up in a cage and die there, poked and logged until the end. Then it changed. When puberty hit, he thought, it all escalated. At first, scratches, bruises, controlled shocks, then lacerations, burns, electrocution, blunt trauma, fractures. They broke his arm on purpose to time the healing curve. It wasn't about pain. It was about data, thresholds, durability, immune response, voltage to unconsciousness, burn area versus vitals. And it kept getting worse. His old life had been mental torture, stress, deadlines, insomnia. This was a different hell. Rotating injuries. No real recovery. No mercy. He wondered when they'd start amputations, organ removals, pathogens, parasites. He pictured himself broken into labeled slices in some freezer. What hurt more, the years of silence or this? At least Castaway had Wilson. He had nothing but the clutter of human culture in his head to keep him from cracking. Until he started to crack anyway. He lost the thread. Body wrecked. Hope gone. Karma, he thought. Work himself to death in one world, caged in the next. He didn't know how long he'd been there. But he knew the end started when the lights stopped turning off. They stayed on. Forever. No meals. No footsteps in the hall. No doctors. Forgotten. The faucet still worked. Food didn't. Hunger went from dull ache to knives. His arm was still in a splint. He could barely sit up. Constant light stripped sleep away. Fatigue turned poisonous. He caught himself missing the experiments. Pain meant someone still knew he existed. Now he was evaporating. He wanted to scream in his own tongue. Just kill me. At least give me a last meal. There was nothing to chew. Not bark, not grass, not hope. He considered the unthinkable, his own flesh, but he didn't have the strength to lift his arm, much less bite. Things narrowed, heart slowing, breath thinning, vision tunneling. No fanfare, no angels, no credits. I'm so hungry, he whispered. And then, darkness.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Top secret. Research site 401-20191, Siberia. Director, Pyotr Roslov. April 20th, 1970. Several days ago, a meteor was reported crashing deep in the Siberian wilderness. Upon investigation by the local military garrison, the object was confirmed not to be a natural meteorite, but an artificial construct, a spacecraft of no known Soviet or American design. Inside it, a child, an infant. Orders from Moscow were clear. A containment and research facility is to be built around the impact zone immediately. The craft and the infant are to be studied in absolute secrecy. The subject is now designated Extraterrestrial 1. June 26, 1974. Some imbecile had the gall to suggest dissecting our only living specimen. What kind of idiot gets assigned to my facility? Who let their illegitimate son from a Kremlin brothel sneak onto my team to play scientist? Let the bastard rot in hell. He wants to blow our one lead on extraterrestrial biology before we even get results? He's either an American spy or a lunatic. I filed a report to the KGB. I want his background scrubbed, his lineage sterilized, his family tree set on fire. We don't need that kind of stupidity infecting the gene pool. August 14th, 1976. Subject 1 is now 6 years old. Physiology appears largely human. Normal growth patterns, bone structure, internal organ placement, vital signs, all normal. Too normal. Except one anomaly, the appetite. It's unclear what his metabolic baseline is. Some researchers proposed increasing his nutrient intake to test physical growth limits. But others warned, what if he changes, evolves, becomes unmanageable? We've already had enough problems with mutants. Until we have a guaranteed containment method, I'm siding with the conservative camp. Growth will remain restricted. We only have one specimen. I'm not risking it for hypothetical results. This is in 1944, after all, when Tsarist rebels and Nazi mystics tried to summon a demon off the Scottish coast. That farce gave them a horned infant, one the Americans now parade around as some supernatural weapon. Using demons to fight monsters is one thing. But I've got an alien. I can't gamble that he's equally useful. Train him as a soldier? Let whoever propose that bring me funding from the Winter Soldier program or the Red Room. Without resources, it's madness. February 19th, 1980. Headquarters is dissatisfied with our progress. No breakthroughs in reverse engineering the spacecraft. The materials alone are beyond replication. And the child? Still no significant genetic anomaly. No superhuman strength. No enhanced intellect. No regenerative serum in the blood or spinal fluid. Not even potential for it. X-rays suggest a typical juvenile skeleton. Blood work? Malnourished, underdeveloped. Without context, any doctor would diagnose him as a neglected orphan. If I didn't know he fell from the sky inside a starship, I'd believe it too. I pulled strings, re-interviewed the soldiers from the crash site. Their testimony was consistent. This was the child they recovered from inside the craft. So what am I looking at here? A human born on another planet? Is panspermia real? Are we the alien life? That kind of metaphysical crap doesn't help me justify 15 years of funding. I need results. September 30th, 1983. The Cairo incident changed everything. A mutant battle erupted in Egypt, terrifying displays of power. Telepathy, fire manipulation, flight. The Americans and Israelis got all the footage. Now Moscow is panicking. All superhuman research programs are under pressure. And our site, labeled unproductive. What do they want from me? A spell to keep young forever by bathing in virgin blood? Maybe they'd like me to drain our specimen dry and see what happens? Idiots. If they're so eager to study bloodsuckers, they should take a trip to Transylvania. I still believe Subject 1 holds secrets. The resemblance to humans can't be coincidental. Maybe he's a step ahead of us in the evolutionary chain. But our tools are too crude. We need to go deeper: genetics, cellular structure. We may be missing the very data that matters. No species builds a ship capable of interstellar travel without first mastering its own biology. If his body is the key, not the craft, then we've been studying the wrong thing. I agreed to surrender the pod. It was a calculated compromise. Headquarters wanted it for military R&D, especially after the U.S. announced their Strategic Defense Initiative in March. Let them tear it apart. Now that it's out of my hands, the budget cut didn't hit us as hard as I feared. What remains? I'll invest it all in Subject 1. December 8th, 1986. Policy shifts. New leadership. New direction. On paper, it sounds promising. In practice, a death knell. Programs deemed unproductive are being shuttered. We're officially under review. The clock is ticking. The boys reached adolescence. I can no longer delay more extreme testing. The body must be pushed. Pain tolerance, damage thresholds, regeneration rate. Yes, the methods are unpleasant, but science requires sacrifice. I have no other choice. January 7th, 1988. Economic instability is hitting everyone, even the Eastern Bloc. Budgets are shrinking. Rations that were once delivered are now sold to us. Prices are skyrocketing. If this continues, we'll be trading rubles for black bread and bandages. I've started pulling favors. Old comrades. Shadow networks. It's risky, but necessary, because I'm finally seeing something. Subject 1 heals faster than normal humans. Not like a mutant. No instant regeneration, but still notable. Clean healing. Minimal scarring. Accelerated tissue recovery. His genome remains unreadable. Every known sequencing method fails. That's how I know he's not from Earth. Our tools simply can't decode him. The higher-ups don't care. They want results. Military applications. Super soldier serums. Weapons. Cloning programs. They talk about more winter soldiers, finishing the Foxfire Initiative, as if any of that's simple. But I can't give up now. I'm so close. I can feel it. He's right there, on the edge of revealing everything. A goddess lifting her skirt, just a glimpse of something divine. All I need is one spark, one discovery. November 9th, 1989. The wall is falling. East Germany is collapsing, and so is the illusion of stability. Even civilians now question the party's promises. The veil is lifting, and no one seems to know what to do. I'm not a politician. I'm a scientist, but someone has clearly made a mistake along the way. I pray someone with vision takes the reins soon. I can't afford distractions. I'm on the verge of something monumental. August 1st, 1990. Damn it. Damn them all. I've been told the KGB is watching me. Me, a loyal son of the revolution. Every test, every scar, every sleepless night. It was for the glory of our nation. And now I'm a liability? There's talk of restructuring, of cleaning house. No, I won't run. This place is my life's work. I will not abandon it. Not when I'm this close. August 1st, 1990. That was the final entry. The director's log ends there. Summer in Siberia could hit over 30 degrees Celsius, if you were lucky enough to be in the southern parts. But up in the Arctic Circle, it was still cold enough to require winter gear just to walk outside without freezing your teeth off. Still, for locals used to it, a long-sleeve shirt and jeans were enough. A group of young men, home from the city, were trekking through the ruins of a recently abandoned research base, one buried deep in the northern frost. The site wasn't particularly large. After about an hour of cautious exploration, they'd pretty much covered the whole place. Whoever evacuated hadn't taken much with them. Teapots, cups, a gas stove, lamps, desk lights, even searchlights. Clearly, they'd only taken the essentials and left the rest behind. But to these boys, from a supply-starved village in the Arctic Circle, this was a gold mine. In the Red Empire, those things might be scraps. But here, they were treasure. Wooden filing cabinets, metal lockers, kitchen cupboards, stuff like that could be put to real use. The sturdier pieces could replace the rickety furniture back home. The weaker ones? Firewood for winter. There were even a few rifles lying around, and an old Jeep that wouldn't start. The jackpot. A storage room filled with food. It wasn't overflowing, but still flour, canned goods, dried supplies. Half a warehouse was nothing to sneeze at, and the place still had power and heating. Honestly, even if you ignored all the leftovers, the base itself was a valuable structure. The only real disappointment was the total lack of documents, files, records, anything, as if they'd been systematically erased. Everything inside was a mess. Drawers pulled out, cabinets ransacked. Either someone was in a hurry, or they wanted to make sure nothing usable remained. The deeper they went into the base, the more it began to feel like something wasn't quite right. And then they found it. A door. Big. Heavy. Reinforced. Different. It wasn't labeled, no warning signs, no bright red letters shouting danger or do not open. That gave the group a false sense of safety. They looked at each other, shrugged, decided to open it. There was a valve wheel mounted in the center, looked like the kind that controlled a locking mechanism. They took turns turning it. Sure enough, it released a series of internal locks, and the door creaked open with a metallic groan that echoed through the hall. Inside was a large room, bright, white, sterile, not a shadow to be seen. The steel toilet and sink were cold gray and polished to a shine. But in the middle of the room was something else. Someone. A figure lay, collapsed on the floor. Wait, is that a person? Is he dead? Who the hell is that? Questions tumbled out of their mouths like a burst dam. No one had answers. The tension rose like steam in a sealed room. This place was supposed to be abandoned. Empty. Dead. But here was a body. Finally, one of them mustered enough courage to step forward. He crouched down, eyeing the figure on the ground. Male. Long limbs. Gaunt, emaciated, almost skeletal. His skin was deathly pale. Hair shaved down to a patchy black fuzz. His eyes had rolled back. Only the whites were showing. No rise or fall of the chest. No obvious signs of life. The boy touched the body's nostrils. Then the side of the neck. Nothing. He shook his head. Dead. Do we just leave him here? Someone asked. The others grimaced. I was thinking we could turn this place into a hangout, one said. Not with the corpse lying around. Eventually, the boldest one in the group spoke up. Come on, help me carry him out. We'll bury him somewhere. Properly. None of them were particularly sentimental. But burying the dead was still practical. Efficient. Cremation would require too much fuel. Building a coffin or a mausoleum. Way too much effort. A shallow grave was faster, easier, cleaner. It wasn't about respect. It was about avoiding rot, stench, and disease. Besides, in a world where people whispered about mutants, vampires, werewolves, even zombies, a corpse was honestly the least scary thing you could stumble on. Just as long as it didn't get up. They moved quickly. 2 grabbed the arms, 2 grabbed the legs, and the last pair steadied the torso. 6 young men, lifting one emaciated body. He was heavier than he looked, maybe from dehydration, or maybe it was dead weight, literally. Either way, they were panting by the time they reached the surface. And none of them noticed the subtle change that began the moment the body hit sunlight. Up here, in Siberia's brief summer, the sun was a rare luxury. Warm, precious, so the boys didn't avoid it. They marched straight across the compound, aiming for the woods beyond. The above-ground portion of the base had been disguised to look like a regular village. Satellite surveillance, aerial flyovers. They would have seen nothing but a small rural settlement. Even the vehicles used during the site's operational years had been civilian-grade. Nothing military, nothing suspicious. Like any proper village, it had a small church. And beside it, a tiny cemetery. The boys figured it was as good a spot as any. Whoever this guy was, Burying him in the fake graveyard of a fake village built on a fake research base somehow felt poetic. Besides, it's not like the government would notice an extra plot. But what they didn't see, what they couldn't have seen, was the way the body began to twitch under the sun's golden glare. Slowly, delicately, as if life was returning. Somewhere deep in his cells, buried within strands of DNA that defied human understanding, a dormant sequence flickered to life. Bathed in the golden light of Earth's yellow sun, that mysterious genetic code began to work. It didn't just revive him. It set him on fire from the inside out. Imagine pouring ice water into boiling oil. The explosion, the chaos, the agony. That's what his body went through as the solar radiation was absorbed, converted, and redistributed, flooding every inch of his broken, starved frame. But this wasn't just a simple boost in strength. The energy tore him apart and rebuilt him at a cellular level. Every nerve, every fiber, every fragile corner of his senses was yanked into overdrive. A breeze brushed his skin, and it felt like a battering ram. Wind became a weapon, slamming into his hypersensitized nerves, reverberating through his organs, his bones. His ribs cracked. His liver spasmed, then healed, fast. And when it healed, it came back stronger. It was a brutal cycle. Pain and repair, destruction and renewal. Over and over. A process of violent rebirth. Even frequencies beyond human hearing, ultrasound, infrasound, began hammering at his ears like jackhammers. Every faint vibration amplified to unbearable levels. His eardrums screamed, then adapted. Nerves rewired. Senses expanded. Smell, sight, touch, pain. All surged to incomprehensible acuity. And the brain? It had to keep up. His neurons fired like wildfire. Synaptic pathways overloaded and restructured. His mind was evolving just to process the torrent of raw sensory data. The truth is, no body, no matter how strong, could handle such input without adapting. A human frame would crumble. You don't slap an F1 engine into a bamboo go-kart and expect it to drive straight. It would tear itself apart. But his body didn't tear apart. It changed, hardened, adjusted. Each reinforced cell brought with it new potential, capabilities he didn't yet understand. His frame was becoming more than human. Something faster, something stronger. If his transformation had been gradual, maybe it wouldn't have hurt so damn much. But this was instantaneous, brutal, like a system update downloaded with a sledgehammer. And worst of all, his brain hadn't caught up. The hardware was evolving, sure, but the software? Still running on factory settings. His thoughts were still his own, still human, still slow. It was like trying to run a next-gen game on a Windows 95 rig. The power was there, but the interface was busted, glitched. The data flooding and had no filters. Signals crossed. Sensory wires misfired. Vision bled into sound. Smell tripped memories. Emotions crashed against instinct. He couldn't think, couldn't focus. His brain was just another victim of the chaos. Fortunately, his body knew what to do, even if he didn't. Muscle memory, survival instinct, reflex. The corpse wasn't a corpse anymore. It just hadn't told anyone yet. The switch flipped when the young men finally reached the cemetery. They dropped him unceremoniously onto the ground, joking about where to dig the hole. That drop? That final jolt? To him, it was like setting off a bomb beside his ear. And that did it. The dead man shot upright with a scream that shattered the quiet. The boys screamed back, except theirs were the screams of terror, the kind that made grown men piss themselves. Zombies were the worst-case scenario. You could shoot a vampire, run from a werewolf, bargain with a witch. But a corpse that just got up? Nobody knew how to kill something that had already died once. Get the shovel. Shoot it. Run. But before they could even decide on a plan, the resurrected man bolted. So fast he left a gust of wind in his wake. He wasn't running from them. He was running toward something. The sun. His brain was still scrambled. Thoughts incoherent. Instinct in the driver's seat. But the light, warm, golden alive, called to him. Like a starving man chasing the scent of bread. like a drowning man clawing toward the surface. He didn't run through shadows. He avoided them without even realizing it. His route curved with the light, not because of strategy, but because his body refused anything that would dim his fuel source. He didn't smash through trees, didn't crack boulders in his path. He didn't need to. He was gone before the air even realized he'd passed through it. And by the time he reached the edge of the land, the very brink where soil turned to sea, his hospital gown was long gone, torn to ribbons by air friction. He didn't stop. He leapt, off the cliff, into the ocean. He hit the water like a missile. No hesitation, no splash, just velocity. The shock waves split the waves like a sonic boom. A rolling wall of white water exploded outward, as if a warship had crashed down from orbit. But the farther he went, the slower he became. The glow of transformation dimmed. The borrowed strength faded. Eventually, the water won. He drifted, floated, and finally collapsed on a frozen beach, cold and breathless, half submerged in icy surf. Alive, but only barely. What does it feel like to wake up from hunger? Like someone clamped a wrench onto your gut and twisted, over and over, until it felt like your insides were being wrung dry. The kind of pain that makes you curl up like a boiled shrimp, teeth clenched, fists buried in your stomach. He didn't think he was lucky to be alive. He didn't think anything, really, except that everything hurt, and he was definitely not dead. New bedding, new air, a ceiling that wasn't metal. His brain registered all of it, but didn't exactly process. It was like information was flowing in, but not sticking. Just static. Welcome back, stranger. The voice was old, gravelly, belonged to a wiry man with a head of white hair and a mustache that looked like the only thing on him that had ever been trimmed on purpose. He sat by an unlit fireplace, a half-filled glass of cheap amber whiskey in hand. So, that guy was talking to him? The thought sparked a flash of pain in his head, like someone drove an ice pick straight into his temple. The hunger twisted again in his gut, but the headache somehow drowned it out. Still, something had changed. His mind wasn't the mess it had been. The flood of chaotic signals from his enhanced senses had, somehow, been sorted. Not quiet, but manageable. He blinked. Wait a minute. Was the old man speaking English? He'd studied it in school. Barely. Just enough to fail the entrance exam and cry about it. In a normal conversation, he'd maybe catch one word in 10. But this? He understood it. Every word. Wait, how? The thought barely formed before another spike of pain punched through his skull, like his brain didn't appreciate being questioned. The old man raised an eyebrow, watching the play of expressions across his face. Confusion, realization, pain, panic, grimace. The whole show. Jesus, the old man muttered under his breath. Did I just rescue a lunatic? He shifted slightly, his hand drifting behind the chair, where a shotgun rested in the shadows. Just in case. But then the man on the bed moved. Not to attack, to eat. He saw the food, cold fries, a dense roll of bread, sitting beside the bed, and lunged for it like a starving wolf. And truly, he was starving. His body demanded fuel. His cells were screaming for energy, every fiber still riding the wave of solar-charged transformation. Any normal human, after prolonged starvation, would have retched from that kind of solid food. But his digestive system? Forged in fire. He could have eaten rebar and probably broken it down for protein. Still, even eating wasn't easy. From the first bite, his senses kicked in again, hyper-responsive, hypersensitive. Every crunch, every grain of starch, every trace of oil triggered 1,000 reactions. Every one of them fed back into his brain like diagnostic reports. He didn't just eat the food, he experienced it. In frames. Like someone had paused time and annotated every molecule. It wasn't just a meal, it was data, and his brain struggled to parse it all. The fries tasted of starch, yes, but also dozens of trace elements, oils, and flavoring agents he couldn't identify. It was like staring at a half-completed puzzle, glaring at all the missing pieces. Frustrating, maddening, but strangely grounding. The confusion, the irritation, it helped. Like a tangled, not finally being tugged into clarity. His mind, once overwhelmed, began to thread itself into something resembling order. To the old man, it probably looked like nothing more than a few seconds of twitchy chewing and twitchier blinking. Then calm. Then realization. The man on the bed looked down at himself. He was completely naked. He yelped like a kicked puppy and grabbed the blanket, pulling it up to his chest in a panic. The old man just stared, unimpressed. "Don't get all modest now," he said dryly. "You were face down on the beach yesterday, butt naked and half dead. The surf was washing you like you were laundry on spin cycle." He took a sip of whiskey. "I figure people don't usually bathe like that. Took me half an hour to drag your freezing carcass to my truck and get you back here. Dried you off, dumped you on my only bed, and passed out from the effort. You're welcome, by the way." He gestured lazily to a bundle of clothes nearby. "Didn't see any luggage. So, that's what I got. Don't complain." The words came through clearly, crystal clear, and the man on the bed couldn't explain how he understood them, but he did. No subtitles, no guesswork, just comprehension. He didn't waste time overthinking it. Just grabbed the shirt and tried to pull it over his head. Ryup. The shirt tore like paper. He froze, looked down. His arms, his chest, his strength was still out of whack. He and the old man locked eyes. Awkward silence. "Okay," the old man muttered, rising from the chair and pulling another shirt from a nearby pile of clothes. "Try this one. Maybe don't Hulk out this time." The new shirt was at least clean, sort of. Smelled like it had been washed, if not folded. That was good enough. This time, he moved slowly, deliberately, carefully working the shirt over his head and onto his arms without shredding it. The pants followed. He stayed under the blanket as he slipped them on, because modesty wasn't dead, apparently. No underwear, no socks, no complaints. The clothes were a size too small, but his frame was so thin they still fit. Just barely. Sleeves short, pants riding high. But it was something. And for the first time since the crash, the chaos, the blackout, he was warm. He was clothed, and he was awake. Henry eyed the empty plate beside him. Next to it sat a glass of water. This time he was careful. He lifted the glass slowly, steady hands cradling it like it was made of glass because, well, it was, and down the whole thing in one go. The water wasn't exactly clean. Tasted weird, like iron and something floral. But it was cold and wet, and his body craved it more than reason. The old man finally spoke again. "Name's John Brown," he said. "You got a name, stranger?" The question hit harder than expected. Who am I? Back in the cell under those cold, overlit sink mirrors, he'd seen his face change. He wasn't the black-haired, black-eyed guy he remembered from his past life. His hair was still black, but his eyes? Crystal blue. His skin? Pale. Not the rosy kind. This was that death-white, melanin-challenged European kind. He wasn't the same person anymore. And if he wasn't, did his old name even matter? The Russians had called him NLO Odin, a cold, bureaucratic code name that sounded like a bad sci-fi parody of Norse mythology. No way he was sticking with that. He figured. New face, new world, new name. In halting English, he muttered, "My name is Henry." Keep it simple, he thought. He didn't want attention. He didn't want to stand out. He picked something forgettable, a name you'd lose in a phone book. Henry. Why Henry? No idea. Felt right. Maybe because it sounded plain. Maybe because it didn't sound like a lab rat. Henry what? John asked, brow raised. Last name? He hadn't thought that far. Hell, he didn't even want to think that far. Just Henry, he said, shaking his head. John didn't push. Suit yourself. He switched to Russian, asked something with a slow cadence. Henry just stared blankly. That earned a grunt from the old man, who shifted back to English. This time, even slower. You got anywhere to go? This time, Henry understood. He shook his head. Didn't think so, John muttered, grabbing the shotgun leaned beside his chair. He didn't hold it by the grip, just lifted it lazily from the middle like it was a walking stick. Well, you can stay. Couch in the bar's yours. The bed's mine. You'll work for your meals. Booze costs extra. He walked toward the door, pausing just long enough to toss the words over his shoulder. If you decide to leave, the food and clothes are my gift. But don't expect more. Got it. Then he was gone. Henry sat there, still holding the cup. Go. Where the hell would he go? Even if he somehow made it back to his old country, If that country even existed in this version of Earth, he didn't have his face, his ID, or his name. That life was over. He hadn't even figured out if that past life still happened. For all he knew, the guy he used to be was a ghost in a world that didn't exist anymore. He remembered Area 51 rumors, war in the Middle East, mass looting in American cities. But nothing had prepared him for this world. A world with alien pods, Soviet mad science, and, well, apparently, a guy who kept Captain America's shield on his bar wall. And he'd been here for decades. That number appeared in his mind again, unbidden. 7,427 days. He hadn't counted them, not consciously, but his brain, rewired, supercharged, had logged everything. Every test, every wound, every word spoken in Russian, even if he couldn't understand it. He remembered their faces, their voices, every moment of pain like it had just happened yesterday. And suddenly, that enhanced memory didn't feel like a blessing. He shook his head, tried to push it all away. So what now? If he was right, he'd spent nearly 20 years trapped in that place. 20 years of his life. Gone. His entire youth, eaten alive by isolation and needles and cold metal tables. 30% of an average human lifespan wasted. Jesus. He didn't even have the will to rage about it. Just another unlucky roll of the dice. Another shitty save file. No point trying to go back. That life was gone. But maybe this one could be different. The only thing he regretted? The D drive. The collection. The private archives. No one had cleared his browser history. If someone found that folder, well, rest in peace, past life. New face. New name. New start. Fine. Let's try this again. Henry stepped through the door into the next room and found himself in a bar. Not just a room with a liquor shelf. An actual bar. There were 6 battered wooden tables scattered in the center, with booth seating lining the edges. The kind with torn upholstery and sticky tabletops. 2 pool tables sat under dusty lights. 3 dartboards clung to a wall riddled with holes that extended way past the targets. And then there was the wall. One wall, different from the rest, lined with faded photos of soldiers. Black and white snapshots of younger men in uniform. And in the center of it all, a replica of Captain America's shield. Henry blinked. Behind the bar, John was already arranging bottles, cleaning glasses like nothing was out of the ordinary. Henry walked up to the counter and pointed at the shield. "You got a grandson or something?" John froze. He turned slowly. "What?" "The shield," Henry said. "That decoration. You have a kid into superheroes or something?" His English was clearer now. Smoother. It didn't even register how fast it was improving. John stared at the shield. Something flickered in his expression. Nostalgia, maybe, or loss. "I bought it," he said quietly. Henry squinted. "You bought that?" John nodded. "Back in the war. I almost made the cut for the Howling Commandos. Never did, but I fought alongside them enough." He reached for a glass, gave it a quick wipe, and poured himself a drink, serving with a man like Steve Rogers. He said, voice low, reverent, "You don't forget that. Hanging the shield on the wall is the least I can do." Henry stared at the shield. His brain started connecting dots he didn't want to connect. Aliens, superpowers, cryolabs, mutants, and now, Captain America, the real one. Holy SH, where the hell had he landed? Old John's bar wasn't exactly a hotspot. On most days, one man behind the counter was more than enough. Still, he kept Henry around, let him crash on the old couch in the back, and put him to work bussing tables, sweeping floors, taking out the trash, whatever needed doing. In return, Henry got 3 square meals a day, which surprised even him. He'd always known he had an appetite. But this was next level. Most folks measured steak in ounces. Henry ate in pounds. Whole pounds. Mashed potatoes, the kind everyone else saw as filler or pig slop. He'd down an entire pot like it was gourmet. Maybe it was the years of starvation. Maybe it was just biology catching up. Either way, the moment he had access to food, it was like a switch flipped. Eat now. Question later. And yet, John never said a word. He just kept the meals coming, same gruff silence, same tired shrug. Eventually, Henry started feeling bad about it. Sure, he had no shame, but he wasn't a freeloader. Not completely. So he worked. Even if the bar was a dusty ghost of its glory days, he made sure it stayed clean. Tables wiped, ashtrays emptied, wood floors swept. He didn't complain. And strangely enough, the longer he stayed, the easier things got. Language, for one. Back home, English was that subject you passed by memorizing vocabulary and praying for multiple choice. He'd been terrible at it. Now, it flowed. Reading, writing, speaking, it all came as naturally as breathing. Like the language center of his brain had received a God-tier firmware update. Sure, he still had a weird accent, but even those were fading fast. Between John's grumbling and the local townsfolk's idle bar banter, he was blending in faster than he expected. And he wasn't exactly hiding, either. In a place like this, in nowhere town in the middle of Alaska, every stranger was noticed. Working in John's bar made him practically family. No one asked too many questions, but introductions were inevitable. And Henry didn't resist them. He figured it was safer to blend and then act suspicious. As for the powers, yeah, he still had them. Strength, reflexes, hypersenses. He was aware of every enhanced ability inside his body, but he never flaunted them. Years of being a corporate cog in his past life had taught him the ultimate survival skill. Stay invisible. Don't stand out. Don't draw attention. Just show up, do your job, and make sure no one ever learns your name unless it's on a paycheck. Even now, with strength that could probably rip through steel, he moved with careful, deliberate restraint. No broken chairs. No bent doorknobs. No one ever saw anything unusual. He walked softly, kept quiet, smiled when necessary, and always let others go first. That wasn't just habit anymore. That was strategy. His hearing could pick up whispers through walls. His vision could read receipts from across the bar. His sense of smell? Sharp enough to catalog every customer's shampoo. But he ignored all of it. Because real survival wasn't about power. It was about knowing when not to use it. As for taste, well, that was a mixed bag. Every bite was now an experience. He could tell what oil a fry was cooked in, how long it had sat under a heat lamp, and whether the ketchup had been watered down. Sometimes, that sucked. But hey, it could be worse. And speaking of worse, there was the question he hadn't stopped asking since he woke up. What the hell am I? He wasn't human anymore. Not really. Sunlight made him stronger. Much stronger. The more he soaked in, the more alive he felt. He could practically feel his cells humming like batteries charging. Hair still black. Eyes now a brilliant blue. White skin like fresh snow. No tail. No full moon transformations. So not a scion. Damn. But alien? Definitely. Probably. He'd come from space, after all. Crashed in a pod. Strength tied to solar exposure. The more he thought about it, the more one name echoed in his brain. Superman. Or more accurately, Kryptonian. Which begged a horrifying question. Did I end up in the wrong franchise? Because everything so far pointed towards something else entirely. He'd heard the locals talk. About the super soldier. About a man named Steve Rogers. About Captain America. And they weren't just rumors. They had photos. Old news clippings. Trading cards. John had even shown him a yellowing photo. Grainy but unmistakable. Him in uniform, standing beside a tall, square-jawed figure in red, white, and blue. No way that was fake. This world, this was the real deal. This was Marvel. And not just Marvel with spandex and Saturday morning cartoons. No, this was the dark, gritty, Cold War Shadow Ops Marvel. The kind where mutants existed and people disappeared into underground labs. He'd read the papers, listened to gossip. The Brotherhood and the X-Men were real. He remembered the Cuban Missile Crisis getting tangled up with mutant sightings. The Egyptian Mutant War in '83. Headlines twisted by politics. Rumors dismissed but never denied. People talked about vampires and werewolves, too. Not the sexy Hollywood kind. The kind that leveled entire towns, left fields full of bodies, and never made the evening news. Or only made the weird news. The government's response? Vague denials. Half-truths. Carefully crafted ignorance. They weren't trying to suppress the truth. They were managing panic. Gun debates raged every year and never went anywhere. Not because of the usual politics. Because in this world, Guns were the only thing between civilians and monsters. Henry took it all in, piece by piece. He didn't panic. He adapted. This was Earth, Marvel Edition. And just to put cherry on top, the year was 1990. The location, some no-name Alaskan town. The country, United States. And just for fun, when Henry asked John where exactly they were, the old man had looked him straight in the eye and said, Alaska, Earth, just in case. Whether it was a joke or not, Henry didn't know. Didn't care either. John wasn't dumb. Far from it. The man had buried 2 sons, outlived 2 daughters-in-law, and seen more war than Henry could imagine. He didn't care what Henry was or where he came from. He just made sure Henry got fed and reminded him every once in a while that he wasn't invisible. John's bar wasn't exactly a booming business. Not because it was bad, just because the town itself was dying. Most of the young people had left for the cities long ago. Those who remained were gray-haired, stiff-jointed, and one missed snowfall away from calling it quits, which meant the bar had a very specific clientele. Locals, regulars, familiar faces. Everyone knew each other by name, by voice, and often by the sound of their boots coming up the porch steps. John didn't even bother bartending half the time. He'd be fixing something in the back or asleep in his chair, and the regulars would help themselves. Grab a glass, pour a drink, pop a beer, drop a few bills in the tip jar. Business as usual. That was the kind of place this was. That was why John could run the whole joint solo and still have time to cook, smoke, and mutter obscenities about the weather. Of course, if someone got too comfortable behind the counter, John would toss a string of curses their way just to keep the hierarchy clear. Meals? That was someone else's gig. There was a diner 2 blocks over. John didn't do entrees, just drinks and the kind of greasy finger food that paired well with alcohol and heart disease. Most nights, the regulars showed up after sunset for a quiet drink, a smoke, and maybe a few half-hearted rounds of darts. No one got plastered. No one made a scene. Unless something big had happened. When someone drank alone, and drank hard, it usually meant bad news at home. A death, a divorce, something they didn't want to talk about. When 2 or more old men started drinking like fish, that meant good news. A wedding maybe, a baby, or just a deer hunt that went unusually well. In either case, people gave space when space was needed. And if help was required, they pitched in. Quietly, without asking for anything back. It wasn't about being polite. It was just how things were done. No fuss, no drama, just a kind of worn-down kindness that only comes with age, hardship, and a certainty that life doesn't owe you anything. That said, there was one thing Henry had gotten very, very wrong. He used to think old folks didn't know how to cuss properly. That was deeply incorrect. These old redneck bastards could swear like poets. Maybe the younger generation had gone soft, always pulling guns instead of pulling punches, but the elders? They'd grown up with roast battles before anyone knew what stand-up comedy was. And in this bar, roasting each other was practically a second language. Henry had witnessed scenes like this more than once. Well, look what the cat dragged in. I thought you were dead, you slippery bastard. I was about to start charging rent for the stool you left empty. And yet here you are, still breathing. Must have been a clerical error at the morgue. Give me a beer before your ugly mug makes me lose my appetite. $10. 10. Are you robbing me or paying off a bar mitzvah? You Jewish now, John? Same price it's been for 10 years, you tight-fisted Scottish son of a bitch. You should be paying me to drink here. I'm what keeps this dumb alive. I'll take your money and donate it to the church to reserve you a grave plot. That kind of banter happened daily, sometimes hourly. It was less trash talk and more ritual. A verbal handshake with a bit of spit in it. Racist jokes, sexist jabs, fat shaming, age shaming, you name it. Nothing was off limits. This was 1990, after all. The world hadn't gone full political correctness yet, and these guys weren't about to start now. And somehow it worked. Henry didn't understand half of it at first. Cultural context, timing, delivery, some jokes flew right over his head. But he learned, quickly, because not learning meant standing out. And standing out? That wasn't part of the plan. He wasn't trying to be some streetwise black kid with attitude. He wasn't trying to be the polite, deferential Asian guy either. This place wasn't going to respect a guy for being quiet and humble. They just call you soft. Or worse, effeminate. And that Henry couldn't stomach. Being the lazy underachiever? Fine. Being mistaken for some delicate flower? Absolutely not. One of the town's old women had already started referring to him as that sweet, shy boy with the big shoulders but the soul of a little girl. He almost choked on his fries when he heard that. Nope. No way. Not happening. So he adapted. The jokes, the slang, the way people ribbed each other with a half smile and a middle finger. He watched, learned, and practiced. And when he wasn't soaking up insult etiquette, he watched the bar's one form of entertainment, the beat-up old CRT television behind the counter. There were no premium channels, no cable, just whatever the rabbit ears could pick up, mostly public access news and endless reruns of black and white war movies or 70s soap operas. Didn't matter. Henry devoured it. Not because he wanted to learn English, though it helped, but because he was starved. Not for food, for noise. He'd been locked in that Russian bunker for nearly 20 years. No entertainment, no conversations, no books, no music, nothing. Even silence gets unbearable after long enough. So now, even the corniest black and white film felt like gold. And no, there were no Cokes, no chips, no anime. But John fed him 3 meals a day without complaint. That was more than Henry had dared to hope for. Meanwhile, his body kept changing. He didn't go to the bathroom. Like it all. Nothing in, nothing out. Every calorie was being converted with 100% efficiency. No waste, no mess. And with every meal, his body grew. He was filling out fast, shoulders broader, frame thicker, muscles dense and hard. It was like watching a balloon inflate in slow motion. Every day, he looked less like a gaunt lab experiment and more like someone cast from iron. Anyone paying attention would have noticed. But John didn't ask questions. Henry could sense it. John knew something was off. But the old man had lived too long and seen too much to care about things that didn't matter. Young people were the future. He was just a man waiting out his final days behind a bar. If Henry needed help, he'd help. No lectures, no judgment, just one grizzled hand resting on the shotgun, and the occasional reminder that he wasn't as senile as people thought. You really like old movies, huh? The question came from behind the bar, where old John was polishing a glass more out of habit than necessity. His eyes were on Henry, not the TV. They hadn't known each other that long, but John had seen enough to get a feel for the kid. Maybe Henry had secrets. Maybe he wasn't normal. But John didn't care. He was an old-school kind of man. You lend a hand to the next generation, sure, but what they do with that help. That was their story. All he asked was honesty, humility, and a willingness to work without whining. The kind of values his generation clung to like gospel. And Henry? For all his quirks, he passed the test. So when John saw something he didn't understand, he didn't pry. He asked. Simple as that. Like now. Henry had been glued to the tiny CRT TV more than usual. Not the news, not the weather, the old movies, black and white classics, grainy reels from decades ago. And not just once. If something replayed, he'd watch it again. A third time, still with the same rapt attention. When John asked, Henry didn't answer right away. His eyes shifted slowly, first one, then the other, like a camera panning away from scene. Then he turned his head, almost reluctantly, as if waking from a dream. They're beautiful, he said finally, voice low. And he meant it. To a man raised on 21st century anime girls and high-def Instagram filters, black and white films should have felt like ancient fossils. At best, outdated. At worst, unbearably cringe. He'd seen clips online back in the day, over-the-top silent films, Chaplin pratfalls, exaggerated acting that felt more like mime than cinema. He used to laugh at it. But after nearly 20 years in a sterile, lightless lab, with no music, no books, no color, no people, even a scratchy movie on a busted TV screen was a revelation. At first, it was just something to fill the silence. But now it was everything. He wasn't watching for film school aesthetics. He didn't care about camera angles, lighting, or editing. What hooked him was simpler, purer. The women. The actresses of Hollywood's golden age. Their elegance. Their mystique. Their faces. No filters. No heavy contouring. Just raw, natural charm. He'd been without beauty for so long. His eyes starved for softness, for warmth, that even grayscale radiance felt like sunlight. And one woman in particular stole his breath every time. Audrey Hepburn. At that moment, she was riding shotgun on a Vespa through Rome, her laughter ringing out in glorious black and white. Roman Holiday was playing again, and Henry didn't even try to hide the dreamy look on his face. "She's what real dreams are made of," he muttered, gesturing at the screen. John snorted in agreement. "Golden Age actresses aren't like the plastic ones we got now. Not every woman who pouts at the camera is a Monroe." "Monroe, huh?" Henry said, with a raised brow and a half-smile. "No offense, but I'll take Audrey over Marilyn any day." He wasn't dissing Monroe directly, but his tone made it clear. Class over cleavage, every time. That got a rise out of the regulars. A chorus of old man groans and soda can hisses erupted from around the room. "Kids got no taste," one of them grumbled. "You ever tried cuddling a stick? Bones'll poke your ribs." Monroe had curves you could drown in. "She was America's sweetheart," another added. "Audrey looks like she'd vanish if you sneezed too hard." "You fools," someone else cut in. Garbo. Greta Garbo was the real goddess. Cold as ice, but worth burning for. "Bah, you all lack vision," said a gray-bearded man by the jukebox. Hedy Lamarr. "That woman was pure lust in human form. I saw her once, and I never stopped thinking about her. Not once." Henry leaned back, blinking at the bickering chaos. "Wait, all of you have different top picks? Like that different?" The men chuckled. "Son, it ain't about who's best. It's about knowing what real beauty used to be. Back when every face on screen didn't look like it came out of a Botox factory. These days, anyone with a nose and two eyes gets cast." "There's too much choice," another chimed in. "Too many options make you forget what good looks like." "Honestly," someone muttered, "I think you lot just argue for sport. Better than talking about cholesterol. Hey, let a man dream. At our age, it's all we've got. Dream all you want," a voice called from the back. "But keep it PG and make sure you're home before your wife finds your search history." Then one particularly crusty old-timer added, "At the rate Hollywood's falling, we'll probably get some square-faced, wide-mouthed goblin as the next leading lady. Big enough to eat the camera lens whole." The entire bar burst into laughter. Except Henry. Henry had his head in his hands, groaning softly. "Oh God," he muttered, "don't give him ideas. Just don't. You guys joke now, but in a few decades you'll see." He didn't elaborate, didn't explain, but his tone sent a ripple of unease through the laughter. It was all in good fun, until someone asked, "Say, Henry, if you're that into movies, why not go to Hollywood?" And just like that, the room went quiet. Dead quiet. One of the reasons there weren't many young people in town was simple. The old folks wanted them gone. Not out of spite, out of hope. They knew this place had no future. It wasn't a town. It was a waiting room for the grave. No jobs, no opportunities, no purpose. This was a place to retire, not start over. So when Henry showed up, young, strong, and clearly not from around here, they welcomed him without question, but also assumed he wouldn't stay. Today's question wasn't random. It was a test, a nudge. If he wasn't running from the law and wasn't hiding from some broken heart, then he had no business wasting his best years in a dying town full of dying men. He should be out there, somewhere. And if he didn't know where to go, well, these old-timers had plenty of ideas. That was just what bored old men did, matchmake careers like their wives matched up grandkids. But Henry, ever the smartass, brushed it off with a smirk. "How am I supposed to get there?" "Swim to California." John, wiping down the bar with his usual gruff patience, didn't miss a beat. "If it's money you need," he said evenly, "I've got a stash." Henry blinked. The comment wasn't a joke, and it wasn't casual either. There was something in John's tone, firm, unshakable. No pity, no hesitation, just an offer, plain and honest. Henry turned toward him, the sarcasm dying in his throat. Every instinct in him said to decline. Years of struggling had taught him that handouts always came with strings. Favors meant debts. Gifts meant leverage. But when he met John's eyes, clear, steady, impossible to read, something told him this wasn't that kind of offer. The old man didn't pity him. He respected him. and that made it even harder to say yes. Still, Henry tried to joke his way out of it. Come on, what kind of paycheck am I getting here? I've eaten my weight in food since I got here. If you paid me minimum wage, I'd still be in the red. John huffed, glaring. This is my bar, and I'll decide what you're worth. I've got more saved up than you think. I could drop it all on some college girl and still have enough left to bury your sorry ass in style. Henry grinned. Better save it for a coffin with a decent lid. If the coyotes have to dig you up and you're just bones and gristle, you'll be screwing them out of a decent meal. The bar erupted in laughter, John included, though he looked like he wanted to throw the nearest whiskey bottle at Henry's head. And just like that, the tension faded. That's how things worked in this town. Banter was how they talked. Teasing meant you belonged. Then someone called out from a corner booth. If you want money, why not try the crab boats? What, is it that time again? Yup. Season's opening soon. Word is captains are already looking for greenhorns. Didn't someone try to sell their boat last year? Sell it? Hell no. He just wants a sucker to be captain while he collects the cash. You don't sell a boat that brings in gold. Just hire someone else to do the dangerous part. That kicked off a whole round of local gossip. Henry barely followed half of it. He turned to John, brow raised. Wait, crabbing? Like real crab? That pays. One of the older guys leaned in. Not just any crab, kid. King crab. The kind with legs that stretch taller than a man. Worth a fortune. King crab. Henry repeated, stunned. He'd never tasted it, couldn't afford to, but he'd seen the price tags. Enough to make a broke man cry. If that was what they were fishing up here, then yeah, he could see why people risked their lives for it. John, however, looked unimpressed. It's tough work, and dangerous. But honest, someone else cut in. No worse than construction, and way better pay. You get a full haul, a good captain, you're looking at 30 grand for 2 weeks' work. Even rookies walk away with 5. Henry went quiet. He hadn't handled the bar's finances, but from what he'd observed, the dollar had roughly the same value as back home. Beer, $1 or so. A steak dinner, maybe 5 or 10. Rent? You could buy a house for under 10 grand. On a bar like John's for 30. Small town prices, sure, but that only made the math more tempting. One good run on a crab boat could pay for a house. One trip. Henry wasn't dumb. That was a hell of an opportunity. Still, he didn't jump at it. Not yet. Instead, he glanced at John again, searching the old man's face. They hadn't said it aloud, but Henry knew they were alike. Low risk, low profile. Survive first, dream later. So he waited for the verdict. John didn't dodge it. If you want to try it, he said, I won't stop you. It's an honest job. But make no mistake, men die out there. Every year, boats go down and never come back. You're not just risking sore muscles and bruised pride. Henry nodded. It was more than fair. It was the truth. King crab season only lasted a few months, but it was one of Alaska's biggest industries. Everyone knew someone who tried it. Everyone had heard the stories. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't romantic. It was dangerous, brutal, and paid in blood and bone. But paid well. And Henry needed money. Desperately. Not just for survival. For future. For freedom. He'd spent nearly 20 years as a lab rat. A prisoner with no choices. Now, for the first time, he could choose anything. And in a world like this, money wasn't just power. It was protection. Stealing from the town wouldn't help. There wasn't enough cash in the entire bar to fund a one-way trip to Anchorage. But the crab boats? That was real. And real was all Henry wanted. Technically, Henry's little town had a dock, but that was mostly for tiny freight boats hauling in supplies. If you wanted real ships, real work, you had to head south to the next town down the coast. That's where the crab boats launched. Fortunately, the two towns weren't strangers. Everyone knew everyone, or knew someone who did. So when Henry said he was serious about getting on a crab boat, the local old-timers made a few calls. Put in a word. Passed his name along. Old John even drove him there himself. John took the driver's seat. Riding shotgun was the Pole, a grizzled old fisherman who used to run with one of the local captains. Henry? He rode in the truck bed, bundled in an oversized coat, soaking in what little sunlight October had to offer. Technically, it was fall. In Alaska, it felt like winter had already arrived. But Henry didn't mind. The chill air didn't bite as sharply as it used to. Not anymore. If anything, he welcomed the sun. Just sitting there, arms folded and face tilted upward, he felt charged. He wasn't stupid enough to sunbathe like a lunatic in front of everyone, just in case his Kryptonian theory turned out to be true. But that didn't mean he didn't enjoy it. And riding in the back like this, it felt familiar. John had told him. After he found Henry unconscious on the beach, he tossed him in the truck bed just like this and drove him back into town. Full circle, in a weird way. Not far, they said, which in Alaskan terms meant 3.5 hours of doing 70 on half-frozen roads. Henry now understood that close meant something very different up here. Maybe it was measured in dinosaur spinal cord lengths or some other impossible metric. When they finally pulled into Harbor Town, Henry caught his first real glimpse of what crab season looked like. The docks were alive with noise and motion. Grizzled men hauling gear, welding equipment humming, crates being loaded, ropes coiled and uncoiled with practice speed. Boats lined the wharf in long rows, hulls stained by rust and salt. This was crab season, October to November. The only time of year when hundreds of boats launched into the freezing waters of the Bering Sea to catch king crab, the kind of beast you paid top dollar for at fine restaurants. 2 months, $500 million. That was the scale. People made their year's wages in weeks. Some lived like kings off a single run, but others never came back at all, which was why the right boat mattered. Some captains would take anyone with a pulse and a death wish. Others ran a tight ship, staffed by veterans. Nobody wanted to be on a rookie boat, the kind that sank because no one knew what they were doing. That's why the old guys back home hadn't just sent Henry to any boat. They sent him to the Annie II, captained by George Jefferson III. Name sounded like a presidential merger. But around here, the man was legend. George had inherited the boat from his father, who'd inherited it from his father. He'd been on deck since he was old enough to tie a knot, and every fisherman on this side of the state knew his name. You wanted to learn the ropes? You went with George. You wanted to survive your first season? You begged for a spot on his crew, which made this interview something of a big deal. As they pulled up beside the Annie II, Henry could already see a storm of movement on deck. Men repairing gear, loading supplies, checking hydraulics. The whole vessel looked like it was preparing for war. The pole didn't wait. He leapt onto the deck like a man half his age, shouting, "Hey, old bastard, you remember I said I'd bring you a greenhorn?" A voice shouted back from the engine room. Moments later, a mountain of a man emerged, shirtless despite the cold, wiping grease from his hands. George Jefferson III looked like he'd been carved out of ship steel. His frame was all bulk and calluses, not gym-built muscle, but the kind that came from decades of hauling rope and slamming steel. What little hair he had left was white, and his beard stubble matched. But his eyes were sharp, like seawater and sky mixed together. He stepped on a deck, squinted at the truck. Then he saw John. "Look who it is," George barked. "Unless you brought a bar to my ship, old man, I ain't paying a damn dime for whatever overpriced swill you're pushing." John fired back instantly. "And here I thought your eyesight was only good for spotting crab. Can't you see the human I brought with me? Or I don't need to swing by your house and check if your wife's still alive." George grinned, hands raised in mock surrender. Same old bark, same old bite. Then he turned, finally sizing up Henry. Up close. The kid was tall, solid, not gym-sculpted, but dense. Like he was built for impact. "Name?" George asked, voice gravelly. "Henry, sir. Just Henry." Still figuring out the rest. George circled him once, then gave his shoulder a heavy smack. Henry didn't budge. Felt like the guy had just slapped a concrete wall. George nodded, impressed. "You'll do." Then, turning to the others, he said, "He's in." To Henry, he added, "Don't get cocky. This ain't a joyride. It's cold, it's wet, and it hurts. Once we leave port, you're stuck. No backing out." Henry nodded. "Understood." John chimed in with a smirk. "Just make sure you've got enough rations on board. This one eats like he's prepping for hibernation. Don't come crying when he starts boiling the catch for lunch." George laughed, deep and rough. "Long as he doesn't puke it back up mid-storm, we'll be fine." On the Annie II, nobody called him Henry. From day one, the crew followed Captain George's lead and gave him a new name, Greenie. Short for Greenhorn. New guy. Rookie. Or in plainer terms, the The guy who knows nothing and has to earn everything. There's an old saying, old hands give orders. Mid-timers wait their turn. Greenhorns shut up and survive. And on this boat, Henry was the greenest of them all. The other men, even the least experienced, had sailed with George last season. Henry didn't even know how to tie a proper knot when he came aboard. But he wasn't here to prove how strong he was. That would have been easy. Too easy. Sure, he could lift a steel crab pot one-handed or crush a frozen latch without blinking. But why? To make people suspicious? Draw attention? If he wanted an easy life, he would have stayed back in the bar. This was the real world. And here, respect had to be earned. Captain George didn't tolerate hazing, but he didn't coddle, either. That first day, during the calm sail toward the Bering Sea, was the last moment of peace anyone would get. After that, it was hell on water. 21-hour workdays. That was the average. And no, that didn't mean a straight 3-hour break to sleep. Those 3 hours? Scattered across the day in 5 or 10-minute slices. Maybe an hour and change, if you were lucky. Work ran in shifts, 2 or 3 hours per rotation, with tiny breathers in between. Enough time to piss, wolf down cold food, and collapse on whatever flat surface you could find. Lunch and dinner? Those were the only 2 real breaks, maybe 20, 30 minutes tops. If the cook was feeling generous, you got hot stew. Otherwise, crackers, jerky, and hope. The work? Brutal. Dangerous. Non-stop. Each steel crab pot weighed over 750 pounds. Henry's job was to stuff bait sacks, usually bloody chunks of meat, into the cages, then help haul and prep them for drop. And once a pot hit the water, no break. Because there wasn't just one pot. There were dozens. As soon as one dropped, it was time to winch up the next. Rinse, repeat, reset the bait, and send it back into the freezing black below. Then came the ice. The sea spray didn't just soak the deck, it froze on contact. Every surface became slick, deadly, and top-heavy with jagged ice buildup. If too much ice collected, the boat would list, and then capsize. So even when the pots were in the water and the lines coiled, no rest. Out came the sledgehammers. Time to smash ice. Again. Greeny didn't get near the winches. Those were for seasoned crew only. He worked the deck, helped prep the gear, helped sort and haul the catch. And when they finally winched the cages back up, well, those crabs didn't come out politely. King crabs were armored nightmares. Giant, spiky bastards with claws like bolt cutters. Even hauled from deep sea, they were fast, aggressive, and damn near weapons grade. The claws could take a finger if you got sloppy, so everyone wore gloves. Even Henry. Sure, his skin could probably tank the damage, but he wasn't out here to be Superman. He was out here to be a man, just one of the crew. But none of that, not the workload, not the danger, was as bad as the weather. The Bering Sea in October wasn't just cold. It was lethal. Freezing salt wind ripped straight down from the Arctic, laced with sleet or snow, often slamming into the boat like a freight train. Waves towered over 10 meters high. Wind gusted over 16 miles an hour. And the Annie II was not a cruise ship. Every step was a fight for balance. A wrong move could send you flying off the deck and into the ocean. And while this wasn't the Navy, George would order a rescue if someone fell overboard. Nobody was under any illusions. In seas like this, going overboard meant maybe a 60-second survival window. If someone didn't spot you fast enough, you were just gone. The real test for greenhorns wasn't guts. It was whether or not you puked your soul out. Seasickness wasn't optional. It was a rite of passage. But if you couldn't get it under control, you were useless. Every crab season, dozens of boats lost crew to dock walk. Newbies who bailed after a single day, puking their guts out and begging to go home. That's why so many boats were always hiring. Henry had considered pacing himself, taking it easy, saving energy. Then he lived through one full shift. Between the ice, the crabs, the constant movement, and the hellish cold. He got it. Nobody here worked slow because it was a choice. You worked fast because the faster you worked, the sooner you went home. Every hour on deck was gambling with death. Better to be done in 5 days than risk dying on day 9. That's why a good captain was everything. And George? George knew the sea. He couldn't see the crabs on sonar, but he knew how to find them. Years of instinct, gut feeling, maybe luck too. When he dropped the first set of pots, they came up full. Again and again. With a lesser captain, you'd be out there for 2 weeks praying for a half load. With George, 5 days in, they were halfway to full. And Greenie? The crew loved him. Sure, he didn't know a damn thing at first. But once he learned something, he never had to be told twice. No ego, no whining, no slacking. He took orders, worked fast, asked smart questions, and never, ever complained. When he made a mistake, he fixed it. Fast. Hell, even the old hands were impressed. And best of all, he wasn't trying to show off. No posturing. No macho bullshit. No look what I can lift nonsense. Just a guy doing his job, better and better, every shift. 5 days in, he was already helping with advanced tasks. Only thing he hadn't touched was the helm. But everything else? From gear maintenance to crab sorting, he was in the rotation, and no one had a bad word to say about him. Rough seas weren't just an inconvenience, they were the #1 cause of accidents aboard a crab boat. It didn't matter how experienced the crew was. On the Bering Sea, all it took was one rogue wave to throw everything and everyone off balance. Even with Captain George at the helm, even with every deckhand running at full alert, chaos had a way of crashing in without warning. Out here, you looked out for your crewmates. That wasn't a suggestion, it was survival. No one on the Annie II operated with the mindset of every man for himself. The unspoken rule of the ocean was simple. Out here, you've got each other or you've got nothing. That kind of mutual reliance had a way of getting under your skin. And while Henry worked hard to keep his powers on the down low, the truth was, the longer he stayed aboard, the harder it was to stay detached. Sometimes a helping hand was just a reflex. As long as he didn't overdo it, no ridiculous feats of strength, no obvious impossibilities he could pass. Mostly. But then came a moment where instinct nearly blew his cover. They were mid-haul, pulling in another full crab pot from the icy black deep, and spirits were high. After several disappointing drops, Captain George had finally hit the jackpot. Pot after pot was coming up brimming with writhing, spiked king crabs. A few more like this, and they'd be headed home. Fast. One of the younger deckhands, freshly promoted from his own Greenie status this season, was guiding the pot in with the tether line, helping swing it in toward the deck. That's when the wave hit. Not a towering monster, just a side snapper. But it was enough. The boat lurched hard. The pot swayed out, metal groaning as tension shifted. One of the crane lines snapped. The entire cage dropped back toward the water, still tethered, but now swinging dangerously. And worse, the tether had looped around the young guy's arm. The pot lurched outward with brutal force, threatening to drag him overboard or tear his arm clean off. It all happened in a second. Henry moved faster. He caught the pot with both hands, digging his boots into the slick deck and bracing against the rail. Muscles tensed, arms straining, jaw clenched in a performance of effort, because pretending to struggle was harder than actually holding the thing. He couldn't look too strong. Just strong enough. The younger deckhand hit the deck hard, yelling out. A second later, crew members swarmed in, one slicing the line off the guy's arm while another dragged him back to safety. With the rookie clear, the rest of the crew turned their attention to the crab pot, now dangling precariously over the edge, supported only by Henry's makeshift brace. They had 2 choices: cut the rest of the lines and let it fall, or salvage it. It wasn't an easy call. That pot was heavy. It was also full. Letting it go would mean dumping thousands of dollars back into the sea. But could the kid hold on? Before anyone made the call, Henry gritted out, teeth clenched for effect. Can you reattach the snap line? That was all the motivation they needed. Hold tight, Greenie, someone barked, already rushing to grab a spare cable. 2 crewmen climbed up onto the rig, anchoring themselves with harnesses while another clipped the backup line into place. Within seconds, experienced fingers tied the new line with practiced ease. Now, someone shouted. Henry released his grip. The tension shifted. The new cable took the weight. The pot dipped slightly, but held. Cheers broke out across the deck. Together, they reeled the cage in and dropped it onto the deck. Safe, intact, loaded, and then finally everyone exhaled. Henry slumped against the railing, sucking in air like he'd just run a marathon. His gloved hands hung limp, and no one questioned it. Why would they? You couldn't see strain through padded gloves, and no one expected superhuman endurance out of a guy who looked like he'd just aged 10 years in 10 seconds. The injured deckhand sat slumped against the wall of the wheelhouse, pale and wide-eyed, cradling his arm. It wasn't broken, but it was badly pulled. He'd be lucky if he didn't need a sling. Captain George emerged from the cabin just as the last of the chaos cleared. He'd seen it all from behind the glass. But before he could give orders, his crew had already handled it. He gave both young men a once-over. First the rookie shaken, but alive, then Henry. No lecture, no grand speech, just a heavy hand on Henry's shoulder and a gruff. Good work. You save his arm or worse. No one asked how Henry had held the pot steady. Technically, he hadn't taken the whole weight. The other 3 crane lines had held most of it. It had just tilted dangerously. For all they knew, he just kept it from swinging off. In crab boat culture, weird saves weren't unheard of. People did crazy things when adrenaline hit. Miracles happened. Sometimes. George barked new orders. Swap that snap line for a new one. Let's clear the spot fast. We're heading back as soon as these pots are up. We've got enough to call it. One of the crew called out, surprised. Already? We're heading in early. George shrugged. 8 tenths full. This batch looks good. You want a bigger paycheck or a body bag? That shut everyone up. Henry clapped his gloves together and stood straighter. I'm good. No rest needed. The rookie didn't answer. He was still shaking. George pointed at Henry. You're taking 10? That's not a suggestion. Head below. Grab a bottle of whiskey. One for you, one for the kid. He looks like he just saw God. Aye, Captain. Henry headed inside. No arguments. The warmth and the drink would do them both good. The rest of the crew didn't gripe about the break. They just got back to work. After all, the faster they loaded up, the faster they got paid, and the faster they got the hell off this floating death trap. The kid who'd nearly lost his arm, still trembling as he clutched the stainless steel cup of whiskey, wasn't exactly your average deckhand. He was a mutant, not one of the flashy, headline-making types with laser eyes or metal wings. No, this one had discreet gills along the sides of his neck like a shark. Made him useful for underwater recon, especially when it came to spotting king crab migrations. Useful, in theory. But like most mutations, there were drawbacks. The Bering Sea's freezing waters didn't care if you had gills hypothermia, still hit the same. And while he could breathe underwater, getting back on board in rough seas took time, effort, and often risk. Because of that, the kid rarely went down. In 5 days at sea, he'd taken a plunge all of twice. Most of the time, it was still up to Captain George's decades of experience to track down crab clusters. And if Henry was honest, the kid didn't exactly scream crab boat material. Thin, frail, all nerve and no muscle. For a job built on raw endurance and teamwork, he sat in a weird space too useful to ignore, too fragile to fully rely on. Was there discrimination against mutants on crab boats? Not here. Not under Captain George's watch. Not when every hand counted. His words were gospel aboard the Annie II. You've got hands, and don't eat your crewmates when rations run low. You're welcome aboard. Out on the water, the only thing that mattered was whether or not you pulled your weight. Everything else, mutations, politics, race, got tossed overboard. Well, unless you were lazy. Then a fall into 10-foot waves might just be an unfortunate accident. The mutant kid sat there nursing his whiskey for a solid 20 minutes, eyes glazed and still pale. Can't really blame him, he'd come inches from losing a limb. Or his life. When he finally stood and rejoined the crew, no one gave him grief. Hell, in this line of work, just getting back up earned respect. Henry, on the other hand, had knocked back his own drink and gotten straight back to it. By now day 5, the crew operated like clockwork. Even Henry, the greenest of the green, had settled into rhythm. A nod here, a glance there. They barely needed to speak anymore. And though none of the old hands were saying it out loud, every single one of them knew the truth. This rookie was punching way above his pay grade. By sunrise on day 6, the Annie II was headed back to port. They hadn't even cleared the last crab bed. The hole was just too damn full, packed to the brim with writhing, oversized crustaceans. At that point, staying out any longer was just asking for trouble. Docking meant more than just tying off. The crew still had to unload the crabs, pack them in ice, weigh them, and prep them for sale. The harbor wasn't some slick, high-end auction block like in the big cities, but it had its own rugged system. Buyers from fisheries were already waiting guys with clipboards, checkbooks, and cold eyes. They scoped out the first few crates, gauged size and quality, then placed their bids on the whole haul. Whoever won the bid would write a check on the spot payable to the captain, or in this case, to Captain and owner George. Then came the payout. Most of the crew were on fixed contracts. A few of the more senior guys had profit shares, getting bonuses tied to how big the haul was. If the captain and the ship's haul were solid, everyone got paid real money. Henry was, naturally, the last in line to get his paycheck. The others left the captain's small office with wide grins and folded checks, already tossing around plans for bar crawls and weekend benders. Even a mutant kid was bouncing on his heels, flicking his check like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Drinks on me tonight," he shouted, high on adrenaline and the smell of shore. When it was finally Henry's turn, he glanced down at his check and froze. "Captain, you sure this isn't a mistake?" George didn't even look up. "No mistake, kid. But this is way more than the rate you quoted me." "Yeah," George said, setting down his pen and leaning back in his chair. "I checked that frayed hoist line myself. It was a maintenance screw-up. My screw-up. I should have caught it before we left port. You saved that kid's arm and saved me from an insurance claim. That extra cash? Consider it hush money from the universe." Across the room, the mutant kid's ears perked up. "Wait, I could have gotten insurance money." He was immediately rewarded with a sharp smack to the back of the head from one of the veteran deckhands. "You want a check or your arm, dipshit?" The kid glanced down at his still-attached limb and cradled it sheepishly. Arm's great. Never better." Henry chuckled and tucked the check in his coat pocket. "Thanks, boss." He'd already peeked at everyone else's amounts, one of the perks of having supervision. Even with the bonus, he'd still earned the least. Same as the mutant kid. But for a rookie, it was more than fair. Actually, it was generous. With checks in hand, the mood turned rowdy. Plans were made, bars were chosen, and a few of the older guys just wanted to sleep for 3 days straight and pretend their backs didn't hurt. Captain George didn't join the party. Once docked, he was back to his usual no-nonsense self. But when he noticed Henry still hanging around the dock, he paused. "You need a ride?" Henry nodded. "If it's not trouble. Thought I'd head back to John's bar. Maybe hit the bank on the way." George jerked a thumb toward his truck. "Hop in. I'll get you there." Henry hesitated, then asked, "Captain, will there be another run?" George gave him a sidelong glance. "You asking for a spot?" "I want back in. I want to work." Most people ran from the crab boat life the minute their feet hit dry land. Henry? He wanted another ticket back. It wasn't just about the money, though the money helped. It was the feeling, the rhythm, the focus, the clean weight of exhaustion earned. And yeah, the sunlight helped too. His body drank it in like fuel, burning away fatigue as if it never existed. Captain George studied him for a beat. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." "Good." George smiled faintly, like he'd expected as much. "I'll keep your bunk warm." Captain George wasn't surprised in the slightest by Henry's question. Some guys joined a crab boat for one trip and ran screaming back to land the moment they touched dry ground. Others? They stuck with it, made a career out of it, even if just for a few years to stack some cash while they were young and unbreakable. "Here's how it's gonna work," George said, rubbing the bridge of his nose like he was already thinking ahead to the next trip. "Once I'm home, my wife will handle rotating in the next crew. The Annie, too, will rest one day in port for refueling and maintenance, then she's heading back out." He gave Henry a measuring look. "I don't know how long they'll be gone. Could be a week, maybe more. If you still want to come with my crew, best bet is to show up here in about 7 days and check in. Pays the same as this run, and no more rookie discount. You earned your stripes." Henry nodded gratefully, but George wasn't finished. "If you're feeling restless and want to get back out sooner, get in touch with the Polish guy. He'll know who's looking for deckhands. I can probably find you another reliable boat. But for now, your job is to rest. At least 3 days. Got that, kid?" Henry nodded again, more solemnly this time. Even if he felt fine better than fine, really he wasn't about to argue with George. No captain in his right mind would take a guy back out who hadn't even changed socks since docking. But George's tone shifted suddenly, sharpening. And while you're resting, I better not hear a damn thing about you picking up anything harder than a beer. I don't tolerate junkies on my boat. If you show up stoned, twitching, or even thinking about being a liability, you'll cool off in the Bering Sea before I ever let you on again. You read me. Henry raised both hands like he was facing down an arresting officer. Loud and clear, boss. Crystal. As a Kryptonian, or whatever he really was, Henry figured he was immune to most Earth-made substances anyway. But he wasn't eager to test the theory, especially not with heroin or meth. George stared at him for a beat longer, then clapped a hand on his shoulder, satisfied. Good. Now, take that check straight to the bank. I've seen too many dumbass lose their pay after passing out drunk, soaking it through, or getting it lifted by some barfly with fast hands. Bank, Henry repeated, patting the pocket with the folded check. Right. Is there a place I can cash it instead? George paused. You don't have a bank account? Henry just shrugged. The captain didn't press further, but the way his face pinched said he'd seen this before. Too many nameless kids with no paperwork, no trail, just trying to exist between the cracks of the system. I'll get you help, George said. I know a guy. He's a little rough around the edges, but he knows the ropes. He'll help you sort out the boring stuff: bank account, ID, whatever else you're missing. Name's Tom. I'll give him a call. You just wait in the office over there. Appreciate it, Henry said sincerely. Seriously? George nodded once, then handed Henry a cup of coffee on his way out. It's sludge, but it'll wake you up. It did. The moment the bitter brew hit Henry's tongue, his enhanced senses went into full panic mode. It tasted like ash, salt, and despair. But it sure as hell knocked the fog off his brain like someone had jump-started his nervous system with a car battery. 10 minutes later, a dusty, light brown land yacht from a bygone era rolled up to the office, tires crunching on gravel. It didn't park, so much as lurched to a stop just outside the waiting area. The passenger side window creaked down, and a raspy voice barked. Hey, kid. You Henry. Henry leaned forward. Tom. In the flesh. And looking good, I might add. You see another man around here with this much swagger driving a museum piece. Tom was colorful. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Tan as a boot, hair a half-baked swirl of brown and silver, and sporting sunglasses that hadn't been fashionable since the Nixon era. Henry didn't hesitate. He opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. You reek, Tom said immediately, nose wrinkling. Smells like you marinated in crab guts and diesel fuel. Only thing worse I've smelled is expired herring. Henry gave himself a sniff and winced. In my defense, we lived in raincoats and oilskins for 5 days. The smell sort of soaks in. Tom groaned and rolled down his own window, despite the cold. Jesus wept. First stop my place. You need a shower before I let you near a camera. A camera? You want ID, right? Gotta look halfway human in the photo. Right now, you look like someone Homeland Security's already watching. Henry caught his reflection in the rearview mirror and couldn't argue his hair was wild, his face scruffy, and the general vibe was vagabond in a wind tunnel. All right, he said. Fair point. But I don't have any clean clothes. I've got spares, Tom said, already shifting into gear. If you don't mind wearing something from the Reagan years, we're golden. If you want new clothes, we can swing by a store. Spare clothes are fine. I just need something not crusty. Tom snorted and peeled out of the lot. As they drove, Tom kept the conversation moving. Here's the deal, he said. I run a placement agency. Connect folks like you drifters, out-of-staters, whoever with crab boats that need bodies. I also help sort paperwork, permits, Social Security, tax filings, whatever needs patching. Henry glanced at him. So you legit? Strictly legit. You won't catch me running fake IDs or laundering cash. George vouched for you, so I'm helping. But fair warning, this stuff isn't free. Filing fees, admin costs, you'll owe a little for the hassle. That cool. Fair's fair. Good man. And once it's done, you'll be able to walk into any bank, any hiring office, and not get tossed out the door. Henry gave a faint smile. For someone trying to build a life from scratch, this felt like the first real step. Maybe for the first time since waking up on that beach, things were starting to come together. Wait, you can actually do that. Henry blinked, genuinely surprised. He didn't know the full scope of how identity documents were forged or, in this case, retroactively assembled, but one thing was obvious. He didn't have a legal identity. No birth certificate, no social security number, no driver's license. Hell, no last name. Getting official paperwork, even fake, felt like black magic. Tom grinned, like he got this reaction a lot. Kid, this is Alaska. As long as you're not on a federal wanted list, it's all just paperwork. He paused, then leaned in and dropped his voice like they were in a spy thriller. And even if you're on that list, well, let's just say I've seen worse. You're not, right? Henry raised both hands. No, definitely not. Good, Tom said, instantly reverting to his laid-back swagger. Makes my job easier. A few turns later, they pulled into a small office building with sun-faded signage that read, Tom's Employment Agency and Consulting. We make you legal, in smaller print below. Inside, a middle-aged woman was shuffling papers behind the front desk. She didn't look up, didn't say hello, just gave off that seasoned government worker with zero patience energy. Her desk was scattered with a few odd, gold-toned coins. When George's name came up, though, she wordlessly swept the coins into a drawer and finally acknowledged them with a disinterested grunt. As Henry passed her desk, she gave him a sharp side-eye, then theatrically waved a hand in front of her nose. Geez, where'd you drag this one out from, Tom? A sewer. George's crew, Tom said casually. Just got off the boat. Oh, her tone shifted just a bit. She knew what just got off the boat meant crab blood, diesel, and desperation. She didn't smile, but she didn't kick them out either. In Alaska, a wallet full of fish season money had a way of covering a lot of social sins. No matter how ripe you smelled, Henry didn't take offense. He looked and smelled like hell, and he knew it. Besides, the woman's snark wasn't aggressive, just habitual. The kind of sass you earned by surviving too many years in a small-town office full of weirdos and strangers. And she wasn't wrong. Henry's Kryptonian body didn't sweat like a normal human's, but he had marinated for days in sea brine, crab guts, and wet wool. Add freezing wind and engine oil, and the smell was a Frankenstein of funk, somewhere between old anchovies and burnt rubber. Tom tossed him a clean set of clothes and pointed to the back. Shower's in the corner. Use as much soap as you want. You're going to need it. Henry made his way through the cluttered office toward the bathroom. As he passed a room with a single, saga mattress and a mirror with a crack down the middle, he couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. A bed in the office? Classy, Tom. He resisted the urge to comment, though his imagination painted a picture of Tom playing HR consultant by day and hopeful bachelor by night. Judging by the dust on the sheets, though, that bed hadn't seen action in a long time. The shower was small but hot, and Henry took full advantage. He scrubbed like he was trying to erase the memory of the Bering Sea from his skin. The dirt came off easily enough. The hair, well, that was a different problem. The beard growth on his chin had gotten unruly, and his hair was halfway to covering his eyes. He grabbed a pair of scissors from the sink and tried trimming it. The scissors didn't cut. He pressed harder. Still nothing. Well, that confirmed it. His hair was just as invulnerable as the rest of him. Which meant, Henry groaned, closing his eyes as a ridiculous memory surfaced. In some old Superman animated series, Clark Kent would shave by bouncing laser vision off a mirror to trim his beard. It was played off like a cute gag, but now Henry realized it was probably canon. Do I even have heat vision? He muttered to himself. He hadn't tried. Hell, he hadn't even known he could fly until recently. To play it safe, he raised his palm and aimed at his own hand. If it worked, at least he wouldn't burn a hole in Tom's office wall. He focused, narrowed his eyes, and nothing. He clenched like he was trying to pass a kidney stone. Still nothing. I want to shoot heat vision, he muttered like a lunatic. Nada. Then he remembered something. In Smallville, young Clark Kent's first brush with heat vision came during an unexpected rush of hormones, specifically while ogling a hot teacher. Henry sighed. No way, he said to himself. That can't be it. Still for science. He closed his eyes and dredged up old, long-buried mental files, the kind filed away under definitely clear your browser history. His super brain helpfully replayed vivid scenes, complete with dialogue, music, and, for some godforsaken reason, video resolution metadata. A familiar tingle started to climb up his spine, then his neck, then, wham, a sudden surge hit his eyes. He gasped and instinctively opened them, just in time to see a flash of red and feel a sudden sizzle in his palm. "Whoa," he yelped, shaking his hand. It stung. Not badly, but it stung. The first real pain he'd felt since waking up on that beach. His palm had 2 faint scorch marks where the beam had hit. Henry stared at them, awed. He'd dunked his hand in boiling water before without flinching. This left a mark. It felt like flipping a switch. He could feel the power now waiting just behind his eyes, ready to surge again at will. All he had to do was think the right way, like flexing a mental muscle. So, heat vision check. But now came the hard part. How the hell was he supposed to shave with it? Using heat vision on hair that was tougher than steel was one thing. But bouncing that same beam off a mirror at the perfect angle, without melting the mirror or your face, was another. Superman made it look easy, but the more Henry thought about it, the more impossible it seemed. "Sure," he muttered, glaring at his reflection, "because that's realistic. Just point a laser cannon at your own face and hope for the best." He examined the cracked mirror in Tom's office bathroom and laughed. "Yeah, this'll definitely reflect a sun-powered death ray. No problem." It was official. Physics in the Superman universe didn't make a damn lick of sense. If anyone ever tried to explain how laser vision plus cheap glass equals perfect shave, they deserved a Nobel Prize in fictional science. But hey, if Clark Kent could pull it off every morning, so could he. Eventually, to avoid melting someone else's bathroom, Henry had no choice but to keep experimenting on himself. After some trial and error and a bit of low-stakes bodily harm, he finally started to understand how it all worked. The secret wasn't just his supercharged Kryptonian cells. It was something extra, a field, a biofield. If the sun altered his body, it didn't use all its energy just to make him strong and invulnerable. A chunk of that energy got stored throughout his body, right under the skin, wrapped around every cell like an invisible layer. That invisible sheath was the real reason his hair, his skin, even the stuff outside his body like beard stubble was so damn hard to cut. His indestructibility wasn't just tough tissue. It was this energy membrane. Once he learned how to control it, even a little, he could do things that felt downright magical. Like to shave using a laser beam. It sounded insane, but it worked. Henry focused his heat vision, newly unlocked thanks to some extremely questionable mental imagery, and bounced it off the cracked bathroom mirror. It ricocheted back at just the right angle, skimming the surface of his chin. He flinched, expecting third-degree burns. Instead, the laser seared off the stubble like a hot knife through wax, without even touching the skin. He checked the mirror. No red marks. No singeing. Just a smooth jawline. He grinned, amazed. The mirror should have shattered. The beam should have sliced him open. But it didn't, because he didn't want it to. The field had responded. It shaped itself around his intent. It wasn't that he was burning hair. It was more like he was telling the energy what he wanted, and it made it happen. Honestly, it was freaking cool, but also terrifying, because this wasn't just strength or speed. This was reality bending. Sure, it followed some kind of energy conversion rules. His battery drained a little when he used the laser vision, or when he focused the field to let certain things through, but still, it felt like he could will the universe to bend if he concentrated hard enough. And that wasn't even the scariest part. He raised a hand and snapped his fingers. Just for fun. A little flame sparked at his fingertips. Real fire, dancing like a lighter's flame between his thumb and forefinger. Magic? He wanted to laugh. The amount of energy it drained was enormous compared to heat vision. Just maintaining the flame for a few seconds siphoned thousands of times more from his internal reserves than burning off stubble ever had. Superman had never bothered with magic because, frankly, it was inefficient as hell. Why conjure fire when you could move at Mach 5 and cause enough friction to light a campfire with your bare hands? Trying to play wizard with solar energy was like fueling a nuclear reactor to toast a marshmallow. Possible? Sure. Worth it? Not remotely. Henry let the flame flicker out and shook his head. No wonder Superman never became Doctor Strange. Still, the fact that he could do it made his head spin. And it raised another question. Was he really a Kryptonian? Because there was another race that looked just like them. Daxamites, descendants of Kryptonians who'd intermingled with other species. They also absorbed sunlight and had the same powers, but with one key difference. They were allergic to lead. Lead, as in everywhere on Earth lead. A Kryptonian might fear kryptonite. A Daxamite? A single bullet could put them in the morgue. Henry stared at his hand, which was still wrapped in a strip of damp cloth torn from his old shirt. The flesh underneath was healing, slowly knitting together with soft crackling sounds. It hurt, but not much. Pain, after the horrors of the research facility, was basically just background noise now. If he could survive human experimentation, he could survive a burned palm. Still, he didn't like not knowing. Kryptonian or Daxamite? What exactly had he been reborn as? Had he encountered lead recently? Paint? Bullets? Water pipes? No obvious reaction. But that didn't mean much. He'd have to find a way to test it carefully. Once he'd washed off the last of the salt and crab stink and made himself presentable, minus the bandaged hand, Henry stepped out of the bathroom and into Tom's cluttered office. The old man was reclined at his desk, legs up, aviators still on, looking like a character who'd been cut from The Big Lebowski for being too sarcastic. The moment he saw Henry's bandaged hand, Tom opened his mouth and then shut it again. A long pause. Then, with a glint in his eye and a voice thick with implication, he said, "Look, kid, I get it. You've got energy. You're young, full of hormones. You just spent a week at sea with nothing but smelly dudes and frozen seafood. Hell, if you need a little release, there's a strip club just outside of town. Real discreet. Cleanish. You slip the right girl a few extra bills. She'll treat you like a king for a night." He pointed lazily at the bandage. "But come on, man. Don't go beating yourself bloody. Literally. That's not a private moment. That's masochism." Henry stared at him, speechless. Of all the explanations for his injury, that was not the one he'd expected. And honestly, of all the things Henry wanted to test his heat vision on, Tom's skull just jumped to the top of the list. Would it melt like butter? Explode like a microwave potato? He squinted at Tom's smug face. So tempting, but he didn't fire. Barely. Old Tom had no idea he'd just dodged a bullet. After snapping a few ID-style photos of Henry against a blank white wall, click, click, he escorted him straight to the local bank. First National Bank of Alaska, one of the most recognizable banks in the state, and a 5-star rated institution nationwide. Solid, reputable, boring in all the best ways. It was founded back in 1922 by a guy named Winfield Irvin Sr., riding the railroad boom through Alaska's frontier days. Since then, the bank had become a cornerstone of the community. Reliable, discreet, adaptable. So when Tom walked Henry through the door, the bank manager's slick suit, practiced smile was out of his office before they'd even reached the front desk. "Tom, as sharp as ever, I see," he greeted, offering a handshake. Tom didn't bother sugarcoating his response. Franklin's still Franklin. Won't change in 100 years. Right? The manager chuckled politely. "He's been with us since day one, so I suppose he's earned his permanence." He then turned to Henry. "And this would be Henry, crewman on Old George's boat. He's here to cash a check. Welcome. You've come to the right place. Our bank prides itself on the fastest, most trustworthy service in the country. Will you be depositing to an outside account, or would you like to open a new one with us?" "He wants cash," Tom cut in. "Straight up." "Ah, I see." The manager's expression didn't falter. "Cash withdrawals carry a 0.6% fee. Standard processing for checks is usually 0.4%, but if you open an account, we can drop that to 0.2%. Would you consider opening one today?" Tom added delicately. "He's missing a few documents. If you're willing to be flexible, maybe we can discuss other options." Then he turned to Henry. "Your call." Tom wasn't about to make the decision for him. Some guys get picky over a few bucks difference in fees, but more importantly, he'd subtly let the manager know that this transaction might not check all the regulatory boxes. Best to be prepared. Henry didn't hesitate. I'll take the cash. The manager got the message loud and clear. He didn't press. Sure, working around red tape might earn him a quiet commission on the side, but if the client didn't want to dance, better to stick to the script. Still smiling, the manager slid a polished wooden tray across the desk. Please place the check here. I'll get the transaction started. Henry blinked. That was fast. He'd half expected to get stonewalled for asking for a pile of physical cash. Wasn't that usually how it went in movies? Tom saw the look on his face and smirked. Crab season. Lot of newbies take their pay and vanish. Banks around here prep for that. Keep plenty of cash on hand. Nothing unusual. That explained why, despite being in a small town, the bank had more armed guards than Henry had seen in some airports. Not that robbing the place ever crossed his mind. He wasn't about to screw things up when he was finally making honest money. He placed George's signed check onto the tray. The manager glanced at the numbers and confirmed. Cashing this for 80 grand, correct? Yep. Very well. One moment. He took the tray and headed out. Just then, a sharply dressed assistant with legs for days walked into the room and offered politely, "Coffee or tea, gentlemen? No hot chocolate? No whiskey?" Henry grumbled internally. Out loud, he said, "Coffee, thanks." Tom waved her off. Instead, he helped himself to the manager's liquor cabinet and poured a healthy glass of whiskey. "You even legal to drink yet?" he asked. Henry shrugged. "Depends. What's the age in this world?" 21. "Then nope. I'll stick to coffee." "Too bad they don't have milk." Tom took a sip, grimaced slightly. "Kid, you're missing half of life's pleasures." He kicked back on the couch and got comfortable. "So, how'd you end up on George's boat?" Henry raised an eyebrow. "What? You do background checks now? You with the CIA or something?" "We got time to kill," Tom said. "You want to just sit here and stare at each other? Or admire this fine, completely tasteless office decor? I can guarantee you, none of this art cost more than $100. Henry glanced around. Yeah, cheap framed prints, a fake plant, and a faux leather sofa that had definitely seen better days. Still, he wasn't here for the interior design. I met a guy they call the Pole at a bar up north. Old John's place. You know it. Ah, that crusty World War II vet still kicking. Whole family's full of patriots. He's the only one left now. Henry didn't rise to the bait. Tom might be rough around the edges, but he didn't seem malicious. Tom took another sip. That still doesn't explain how you got George's attention. He doesn't usually give a damn about rookies. You must have done something. There was a situation on the boat. I handled it. Helped out where I could. I pick things up fast. Work hard. The rest, you'll have to ask George. Fair enough, Tom said, letting the matter drop. Their conversation paused as the bank manager returned, now carrying a larger tray, stacked with neat bundles of cash. He placed it in front of Henry with a practiced flourish. After deducting the $480 cash handling fee, that leaves $79,520. That's 7 full stacks of hundreds, 100 bills per bundle, and the remainder's been exchanged into smaller denominations. Please verify. The assistant reappeared, this time wheeling an accounting machine. She moved with precise efficiency, feeding the bills through the counter, tallying the total on a calculator, and confirming it matched to the cent. Henry watched, but didn't recount. He picked up a couple bundles, the thick, rubber-banded stacks feeling almost surreal in his hands. The manager noticed his dazed expression and signaled to the assistant, who returned with a small branded tote bag. "This one's on the house," the manager said with a grin. Henry took the bag, stuffing the bundles inside, still slightly stunned. 80 grand in cold, hard cash. It was real now. Back at the office, the older receptionist was still at her desk, typing away like nothing had happened. Tom led Henry inside and motioned for him to take a seat. He rummaged through a battered old backpack, dumped out some papers and who knew what else, and pushed it across the desk toward him. "Put your cash in this. The bag's yours now." Henry frowned. "Why switch bags?" Tom leaned back in his chair. "That bank. Anytime someone walks out with cash and no bag, they hand out the same exact tote. That tote basically screams, 'Hey, I'm carrying a lot of money, please rob me.'" Henry narrowed his eyes. "Are you saying the bank's in on it?" Tom shook his head. "Nah, They're not that dirty. But no matter how many times they try to change things up, someone on the outside's always watching. Only clueless rookies walk around flashing those branded bags. He gave Henry a pointed look. "You're one of George's guys. I'm not about to let you walk out of my place and get jumped half a block later. That'd make me look bad." "Got it." Henry didn't argue. He stuffed the bank's tote inside the old backpack, zipping it up tight. As long as the flashy logo wasn't visible, he didn't care what held the cash. Once Henry was packed, Tom tapped his fingers on the desk. "All right, now that we've got your payday handled, let's talk business. Getting you proper documents and licenses that'll run you $2,000. 2,000. Henry blinked. "That's way less than I expected. These are real documents, right? Not fake ones." Tom cracked a small grin. "Believe it or not, it's cheaper to get legit papers than to fake them. The only reason most people don't is because they don't know the right people, or the people they don't know what they're doing." He poured himself a splash of whiskey. "The law has more loopholes than a block of Swiss cheese if you know where to look. Thing is, people who know don't usually share. Why should they? They're not obligated to help anyone else for free. There's a saying, all the best ways to make money are written in the criminal code. It's true, and it isn't. It's true because crime does pay right up until you get caught. But it's also false because the real high-level players don't bother with small, dirty jobs. Robbing a bank? That's pocket change and way too messy. What? You think an average crook can hit a score for millions and not end up on every law enforcement radar from coast to coast?" Henry wasn't shocked. Not anymore. He'd seen enough of the world this one and his last to know how things really worked. He still wasn't sure how much of Tom's competence was smoke and mirrors, but if George had recommended him, that counted for something. That old bastard wouldn't point him toward a scammer, at least not one stupid enough to shortchange his own crew. Without further hesitation, Henry reached into the bag and pulled out a crisp stack of hundreds, still wrapped in the bank's band. He dropped it on the desk and slid it forward. Tom raised an eyebrow, picked up the stack, and gave it a slow twirl in his fingers. "Oh, so I'm counting this myself, huh?" "I've got a few questions, too," Henry said. "If you can help, great. I hear you run a consulting firm, after all." Tom set the money back down, pushed it to the center of the desk, and leaned in slightly. "Shoot. Can't promise I know everything, but I know a lot. Is there a car rental place in town?" Tom snorted. "Not unless you count the airport over in Hooper Bay. There are a couple private outfits near there that rent to tourists, but the prices suck. Why not just buy one?" Henry shrugged. "I'm not planning to stick around. Once crab season ends, I want to try my luck in Hollywood." "Oh, chasing a star dream, huh?" "Not exactly. Maybe I just want to see what the world looks like. Either way, buying a car just to sell it a few weeks later feels like a hassle. Plus, I don't have anyone to store it if I leave." Tom raised an eyebrow. "If you're open to some advice, I'd still suggest buying, especially if you're planning to head out more than once." He pointed toward the backpack sitting beside Henry. "You really want to drag that bag of cash through airport security without a bank account? Good luck with that." Henry hesitated. "Domestic flights would be a problem, too?" Tom gave a weary shrug. "You never know how a person with a badge will choose to use their authority. Trust me, smart people stay away from attention. Ferries are simpler. No scans, no guards, no x-rays. You drive onto the boat, you drive off. Done. Hell, you could be hauling a truckload of dynamite, and no one would care, as long as you don't blow it up mid-crossing." He leaned in further, elbows on the desk. "The only downside is the travel time. Takes longer. If that's a deal breaker for you, I won't argue. I just give you advice. What you do with it's your call." Henry nodded slowly. "All right, help me buy a car then. Or at least tell me where to find a used lot." Tom perked up. "Any requirements?" 4 wheels. Runs on gas. That's about it." I got a real laugh. Tom reached into his pocket and pulled out a key ring, tossing a set toward Henry. "Used car lots around here are full of junkers. Just take mine." Henry caught the keys, then stared at them, and then at Tom, who looked a little too pleased with himself. "That's a Cadillac DeVille," Tom said proudly. "A 1965 classic. Anyone who doesn't love that car has no taste. And let me tell you, there's a perk to driving that thing." Henry raised an eyebrow. Tom leaned back smugly. "See, the cops around here? They see those plates, they wave you right on through. Even if they do stop you, Just tell him your paperwork's with Tom. No one's going to hassle you. Ah, so the real value's in the registration. Henry quietly slipped the keys into his pocket. Tom grinned. Anything else I can help you with? Hard to tell if he was thrilled about making a solid profit or just happy to finally have an excuse to upgrade his ride. Henry slid the stack of cash across the desk again. If you think there are any other documents I might need, he said plainly, go ahead and get them done. License too, obviously. I'll need to drive. He wasn't pretending to know how things worked around here. Hell, even before waking up in this world, he hadn't known much about America beyond pop culture and what made the news. This wasn't the time to play smart best to trust the local fixer. Tom scooped up the cash this time without hesitation. 10 grand in neatly wrapped hundreds. He gave a sniff, fanned the edges like a car dealer, and smiled in quiet satisfaction. All right, I'll bundle your ID stuff in with the car's title transfer. Next time you're in town, swing by and pick it up. If you're in a rush, I'll need at least 3 days. No rush, Henry replied. I won't be back for about a week. But are you sure that's enough money? For now? More than enough, big boss, Tom said, then leaned forward with a serious look. But now it's my turn to ask something. Henry what? What? Last name. You can't just go by Henry on a legal document. That's a red flag begging for a background check. Fair point. Henry paused. What name should he use? Kent? Wayne? Stark? Owen? Maybe just keep it simple. No need to borrow from comic book royalty or try too hard to be clever. After a moment, he said, Henry Brown. It was old John's last name, the first person in this world who'd shown him kindness. Borrowing it felt like a quiet nod of respect. He wasn't asking to be adopted or anything. And it wasn't like Brown came with some noble title or inheritance. Works for me, he added. That okay? Totally big boss, Tom said with a smirk. You could have said Charlie Brown and told me you had a beagle named Snoopy. I wouldn't have blinked. Henry stood and shouldered his backpack. Then we're good. See you in a week. Tom gave him a lazy wave, ready to let him walk out. But just as Henry reached the door, Tom stood up, grabbed an empty box, and followed. Henry glanced back. What now? Just clearing out my personal stuff from the car, Tom said. Didn't think you'd want to be cruising around with my trash. It's not a deal breaker, right? No complaints here. Henry knew the universal law. Free stuff often came with hidden garbage. He needed the car, not whatever random crap had been marinating in it for the last decade. Tom went to work. He pulled out crushed soda cans, sticky bottle caps, a few rogue coins, and unsurprisingly a pack of questionable-looking condoms stuffed between the seat cushions. But the real eye-catcher was in the glove box, a shiny snub-nosed revolver, gleaming like it had been freshly oiled. Tom casually holstered it in the box. No gun permit needed in Alaska. Just proof of purchase so the cops can trace it, if needed. So don't blame me when your license shows no firearm record. It's not my fault. State law. Henry raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment. I'm good. Don't need it. Tom tilted his head. If you're driving through Alaska, I'd recommend a shotgun at least. Last thing you want is to meet a bear and have to wrestle it. That made Henry pause. Are bear encounters common? Tom shrugged. Only when you're unlucky. Which is, the worst kind of luck. Because you never see it coming. Henry considered it. Honestly, a bear didn't scare him. The idea of one? Sure. But physically? He had resources. He gave a nonchalant wave. I'll manage. Just as he climbed into the Cadillac and was about to turn the key, Tom flagged him down again. He jogged over and handed him an old, beat-up road atlas. Outdated, sure, but Alaska hasn't changed much in the past few decades. You'll want this. Henry tossed it onto the passenger seat where he could grab it easily. Appreciate it. Then he rolled off. The old Cadillac DeVille coughed a bit, but the engine turned over smooth enough. Manual transmission. Henry had practiced on one years ago, but never owned a car of his own. Between that and his enhanced senses now, driving was second nature. And out here in Alaska, with these wide-open roads, you'd have to try to hit something. There weren't even enough cars around to make traffic a concern. Before heading back to Old John's, Henry made a quick stop at the general store to stock up. The place was a family-run operation husband and wife team selling everything from winter coats to lawn mowers, soda to aspirin. Not a wide selection in any one category, but if you needed it, chances were they had it. Only the older woman was behind the counter today, but she greeted him like an old friend. "Well, hey there, sweetheart. Back already? Was it a good haul?" Henry grinned. "The captain's happy, which means we all got paid decently." He wasn't lying, but he wasn't bragging either. Everyone in town knew he was still the greenhorn on the boat. The fact he came back in one piece already put him ahead of some. "Go ahead and take what you need," she said warmly. "You get 20% off today. My gift to you. Old John's been talking your ear off these past few days. You should head back and let him see you." Henry nodded, grabbed some fresh clothes and underwear, a few snacks, and wandered over to the freezer section to stock up on food. He didn't feel great about freeloading off old John every night. He briefly considered picking up a gift, something to say thanks. But John wasn't the kind of guy who appreciated sentimental junk. His bar was fully stocked and well-maintained. Nothing needed replacing. No clutter. No junk. Henry knew the type. Lived like that himself once. For people like them, a poorly chosen gift just became another item to store, move, or trash. Real sentiment wasn't in the stuff you gave, it was in the small, absurd things that made someone smile. Like a stupid meme, a perfect stick, or maybe a pretty woman walking by on the street. Actually, considering old John's history, if Henry could gift wrap a Nazi or a Japanese officer for the guy to beat the hell out of, that might get a reaction. Henry chuckled at the thought as he loaded his basket. "I'm back," Henry called as he pushed open the bar side door. "Yeah, I see that," came the dry reply. No emotional reunion. No tearful hugs. Just two men acknowledging each other in the most unceremonious, perfectly normal way. They hadn't known each other long, maybe a couple of months, and neither of them was the sentimental type. They weren't going to start sobbing over a fishing trip. Behind the bar, John didn't even glance up as he wiped down a glass. "You just get off the boat?" "Docked this morning. Had a few things to handle before coming back." John, a man well-versed in the grueling rhythm of crab fishing, did the mental math and grunted in understanding. He didn't ask for details. "If you're tired, go crash in the room. Don't pass out in the bar like some goddamn vagrant. I don't run a shelter." He slid a glass of whiskey across the bar without asking. "Legal drinking age?" "Irrelevant." "Got it," Henry said. He tossed the shot back in one gulp and ducked into the back to sleep. He could have pushed through, but there was no point in drawing attention to how inhuman his stamina was. Better to play it normal, blend in. And truth be told, he was tired. Crab fishing in the Bering Sea had been a brutal grind days of nonstop labor in freezing weather. Even with Kryptonian-level resilience, it wore on him. Sure, the constant daylight helped like charging a battery while working, but food energy and sunlight were two different things. Sunlight didn't repair muscle tears or replenish nutrients. His body could keep going, but the moment his mind relaxed, the exhaustion hit like a sledgehammer. He didn't know how long he slept. Long enough that he woke up desperate for a bathroom. That was for sure. Ever since his body had stabilized post-transmigration, all his natural functions were back online, bladder included. Shivering in the cold room, wearing nothing but a tank top and boxers, Henry sprinted to the bathroom. When he stumbled out, bleary-eyed and barely awake, the bar was dark and closed. John was slouched on a couch against the wall, shooting him a withering look like he'd just stepped on his lawn. "You sleeping out here?" Henry asked, and immediately realized how dumb it sounded. Predictably, John's sarcasm was locked and loaded. "When you first showed up, I could have dragged your sorry ass across the floor with one hand," he said. "Now I need a damn forklift. I'm starting to think I fed you pig steroids." He pointed toward the back room with a thumb. "You take up the whole bed like a damn tree trunk. I couldn't roll you over if I tried. And for the record, even if you wash your ass properly, I still wouldn't be interested. I'm not into men, you walking linebacker." Henry smirked. "Well, hey, next time I'll clean up real good. Let you judge for yourself. Might change your mind." He waved it off, then turned to the fridge. His stomach was growling. He'd brought back groceries earlier from town, and now was the perfect time to make use of them. "You want something to eat?" he asked without looking up. "I'm starving." John sat at the bar, arms crossed. "Nah, eating this late's hell on an old man's digestion." Henry didn't argue. He focused on cooking. Back in his original life, he'd lived alone. He wasn't a master chef, but he knew his way around a stove. Not for nutrition, not to save money, just because sometimes, when you wanted something done right, you had to do it yourself. He'd once watched a European indie film, half family drama, half softcore art house, with a scene featuring red wine braised chicken. While everyone else remembered the emotional complexity, Henry walked away craving that damn dish. Couldn't find it in any restaurant nearby, so he tried making it himself. Same with golden fried rice from a favorite anime. He didn't just want to eat it, he wanted to recreate it. Bought a wok, practiced flipping. Results were mixed, but the passion stuck. Over the last month living here, Henry had cooked a few times. He wasn't magically transformed into some culinary god, but he had the basics down. And now, with his enhanced senses and processor speed brain, he was evolving. The spices were basic. This was Alaska, not Southeast Asia. Fancy imports like star anise or five-spice powder were luxuries, not staples. Most households relied on salt, garlic, or whatever herbs they could scrounge from the woods or buy at a premium. And the local economy? Built on fishing and oil, meaning fresh produce was rare, and quality meat depended on shipping schedules or getting lucky with local farmers. Still, America's food culture leaned heavy. Bold flavors, bigger portions, rich sauces. That gave him some wiggle room. Thanks to his enhanced smell and taste, Henry could sniff out bad meat from 20 feet away. Rotten? Chemically treated? Tainted with some weird freezer burn flavor? He could tell instantly. So tonight's steak? Perfect cut. Marbled just right. All it needed was a cast iron pan and salt. Maybe a touch of pepper. As the meat sizzled, he boiled some elbow pasta on the side. Carbs were a staple here, and the only real choices were pasta or potatoes. Pasta won out tonight. With every flip, sear, and pinch of seasoning, Henry let his instincts and his overclocked brain work in sync. Cooking, for him, had become a kind of science experiment, optimizing taste, texture, aroma in real time. Somewhere out there, if scientists knew a guy with near-infinite memory and sensory precision was using his powers to perfect steak, they'd probably cry, or try to dissect him. Henry didn't care. All his power, all his skills, they existed for his benefit. Not to save the world, not to chase glory, just to make life a little more enjoyable. That whole suffer now, rise later crap, that was just corporate propaganda. In real life, you suffered while your boss bought a new Mercedes. As the steak finished and the pasta hit al dente perfection, Henry plated everything up and brought it to the table. John hadn't gone back to bed. He'd opened a bottle of California Red and was already pouring 2 glasses. Figure we might as well do this proper, the old man said, handing Henry a glass. Henry took a sip. Not bad. Smooth. Balanced. Cheap but decent. John stared at the wall of framed photos and dusty medals behind the bar, the so-called Wall of Glory. His eyes softened a bit, glass in hand, as if the past were whispering just loud enough to hear. He didn't say anything Henry could make out, just murmured to himself. It was a universal truth that old men loved to talk about the past. But even so, John didn't often bring up his war stories. When he did, it usually meant he was in an especially good mood. He never told those stories expecting a response. Didn't want validation. Didn't need feedback. He was used to talking into silence. Years of living alone had made conversation a one-man show. Sometimes he'd talk about the heroes he fought beside, how many fascists they took down, how many lives they saved. Other times, it was about meeting his wife during the war and marrying her after. He'd speak of her with quiet reverence. The little moments, the quiet days, the warmth she brought into a time when the world was falling apart. Henry didn't interrupt, didn't chime in with questions or nods or the usual listener cues. Just sat there, eating, occasionally getting up to cook more, then returning to listen. John, half drunk and drifting in and out of memories, kept rambling like he was dreaming out loud. It was almost peaceful. By the time he passed out, slumped over like a collapsed tree, it was already after 7 a.m. But in Alaskan winter, it might as well have still been midnight. Pitch black outside, the bar lit by nothing but soft interior lights. Henry carried the old man to bed, tucked him in, and then got to work cleaning the place. John did clean up after closing each night, but dust had a way of accumulating faster than you noticed. And the old man's philosophy was, if it ain't completely broken, don't fix it. Henry disagreed. Preventative maintenance, tightening screws, oiling hinges, patching up things before they failed, was just common sense. John's avoidance was less about laziness and more about age. The kind of physical upkeep Henry took for granted just wasn't viable for someone pushing 70 with a bad back. Once everything was in order, he flipped the bar's front sign from closed to open, even though everyone in town knew it didn't actually mean open. No one came to drink in the daytime, not unless they wanted a verbal gut punch from John. Like, only drunks and dirtbags drink before noon. Even leeches know to hustle in daylight. You show up here day drinking, we're doing your dad a disservice. Or, the only people I served before dark either got cheated on last night or walked in on it. If that's you, drink away. Otherwise, take your sad ass back to work. Or his personal favorite. Gotta be a special kind of idiot to get drunk this early. Oh hey, it's you. Makes sense now. Basically, John had shamed the entire town into not day drinking. With everything ready and no real customers to serve, Henry made himself comfortable by the window, where the winter sun finally peeked through. He turned on the TV, flipped to a classic movie channel, and soaked up some rays while enjoying the peace. This was the life, at least until the front door opened. A blast of cold air cut through the bar like a knife, making Henry shiver involuntarily. He looked up, expecting some clueless tourist. Instead, a large, bear-shaped man in a police uniform stepped inside. Big shoulders, bigger gut, standard-issue mustache. Sheriff. Henry recognized him immediately. Small town, not many faces to learn. Well, John might have gotten away with cracking jokes at this guy, but Henry wasn't planning on testing his Second Amendment immunity just yet. He stood. Morning, Sheriff. The man wandered casually toward the bar. Just water, Henry. Coming right up. Technically, the water was lemon water, meant for rinsing after drinks, but no one ever paid for it. Henry poured a glass and placed it in front of him. Word is you were out at sea, the sheriff said, eyes scanning the bar like he expected contraband to jump out at him. When do you get back? Docked on the 16th. Came back that night. Henry shrugged. I'm not sure how long I slept, but I'm guessing a while. Today's the 18th. So yeah, over a full day. Good thing I didn't miss much then. The sheriff chuckled. What about John? This is about the time he usually stumbles out front. He's still asleep. He woke up when I did. Talked with me for a while. Then crashed again. You wanted to wake him? Nah. The sheriff walked toward the back without waiting for permission. Mind if I check on him? Henry gestured toward the hallway. Be my guest. The sheriff eased open the bedroom door and immediately slammed it shut again. Jesus, John, he barked. That man could clear a room with that one. Henry winced and offered a helpless shrug. He wasn't exactly in a position to preempt a surprise nap fart. The sheriff returned to the bar and pointed out the window. That Cadillac out front. Yours. Sort of. Got it from old Tom. He said I could use it until the paperwork's finalized. Tom? Which one? The one from the next town over. Runs a consulting gig. Real loud guy. Likes to pretend he's subtle. Ah, that Tom, the sheriff said with a knowing nod. I thought I recognized that car. He gave Henry a sideways glance. You were on which boat again? Old George's. Annie too. Got the gig through the pole. Right. That's a rough run. I worked the Bearing once, years ago. Winter season. Froze my balls off. Never went back. Henry grimaced. Yeah, the boat never stops rocking. I thought I'd be able to squeeze in a nap here and there to stay sharp. Turns out, no one sleeps. Everyone just powers through like lunatics. Exactly. The sheriff grinned. Misery loves company, I guess. Then, more casually, he added, Heard you're planning a trip to Hollywood? Henry blinked. News travels fast, huh? In a town this size? There's no news, just shared gossip. Henry laughed. Well, yeah, thinking of going to see the place. Not chasing a dream or anything. Just want to see what all the fuss is about. You and me both, the sheriff said with a faraway look. When I was young, I had this fantasy. Red carpet, flashing lights, every starlet begging for my attention. Henry's eyes lit up. And didn't even make it past the bus station, he said flatly. Spent 2 weeks fighting for dishwashing gigs, sleeping on a couch that wasn't mine, and blowing through every cent I had. Came back with less hair and more regrets. Oof. Okay, that definitely makes me want to squeeze in another crab run before I go. Smart man. The sheriff finished his water and stood up, brushing imaginary lint off his jacket. Time to get back on patrol. You know how to reach me if anything comes up. Got it, Sheriff. Take care. Henry walked him to the door, watched him disappear into the cold. Then he went back to his seat, sunlight still pouring in, movies still playing, the peace settling again like snow on the windowsill. 7 days passed in a blur. Henry was ready to head out solo this time. No one driving him, no one making introductions. He'd earned his place now. Behind the bar, John was doing what he always did, fiddling with something that didn't look like it needed fiddling, like he was allergic to stillness. He glanced up. You sure George is setting out again? Might want to give him a call first. No point in driving down there for nothing. Doesn't matter. I need to swing by and grab my paperwork from Tom anyway. Even if we're not heading out, I can check the lay of the land. Henry didn't need to pack much. No one on a crab boat gave a damn about clean clothes. 3 minutes on deck, and you'd be soaked in seawater, fish guts, and regret. Rain gear was for wind protection, not staying dry. Dry was a myth. The boat had everything they needed in terms of tools and equipment. So preparation, for Henry, really just meant showing up. Before leaving, though, he dug into the old backpack Tom had given him and pulled out the bank's money bag. He fished out a few small bills, then set the rest on the bar. John, this is the payout from last run. Stash it somewhere safe, will ya? If you need some, use it. John looked at the cash like it had personally offended him. Jesus, why the hell didn't you put this in a bank like a normal person? Last time you found me, I was butt naked and half frozen. You think I had an account? Or any papers? I'm grabbing those from Tom today. John grumbled. So, put the damn money in the bank after you get your paperwork. I already cashed it, and they took a fee. Why would I hand it right back, so they can charge me again when I want it later? You think I look that dumb? Let's not pretend you're some genius. Sunshine. You can't even tell scotch from bourbon. Hey, first time tasting shit. How was I supposed to know that's what shit tastes like? John snorted. Keep your fish stink money. I don't want it. Yeah, well, it's king crab stink. Expensive stink. What? You want me to bring it on the boat with me? Or leave it in the car, so some bottom feeder from the docks can help himself? That got John to grunt in reluctant agreement. The southern dock town saw a flood of strangers every crab season. Not all of them were there to fish. Some were hustlers. Some were thieves. A few didn't even bother pretending and just flat out mugged people. Fine, leave it by the register. I'll drop it in the safe later. Appreciate it, Henry said, shouldering his now empty bag and heading out the door. Late October in Alaska wasn't for the weak. Even with thermals and a heavy coat, the cold hit like a punch to the gut. The kind of weather that made your lungs contract and your balls hide. Not that Henry needed the layers. His physiology could handle extremes just fine, but there was no reason to broadcast how weird he was. Best to look normal, feel normal, even if normal felt like stuffing himself into a cotton oven mitt. Once on the road, Henry didn't bother with posted speed limits or defensive driving. He focused, fully locked in, super senses dialed in to the road ahead. No traffic, no cops, no surprises. The Cadillac DeVille, an old 65 model, was ancient by any standard. But Tom had taken care of it like a jealous lover. No major wrecks, no lazy fixes. It ran smooth, even with ice patches along the shoulder. Two-lane blacktop stretched ahead like a promise, and Henry kept the needle around 100 kilometers per hour without breaking a sweat. The tires gripped like claws, and the engine purred its approval. 2 hours later, faster than last time, he rolled into the southern fishing town that served as the seasonal launch pad. First stop, the docks. If the boat was leaving soon, he let Tom know to hold the paperwork until they got back. If not, he'd swing by Tom's office and pick it up in person. Outside the dockmaster's station, a loose crowd of familiar faces loitered. Fishermen, deckhands, and George himself. The mutant deckhand Henry had saved on the last run was there, too, along with a few others. But one crewmate was conspicuously missing. In his place stood someone new, someone massive. The guy had to be pushing 7 feet, easily over 400 pounds. A walking brick wall. Mutant for sure. His arms were absurdly out of proportion, thicker than his legs, practically hanging past his knees. No sleeves, just raw skin exposed to the cold, like it didn't bother him at all. Henry could feel the attention shift as he walked up. He was the last to arrive, technically, but still 10 minutes early. George didn't seem to care. The old captain stood and addressed the group. "All right, couple quick things," he said, voice loud and gravelly. "First, got a ping from the Annie 21. They're behind schedule, slow on the haul. Docking in 2 days." No one groaned. Everyone nodded. They were used to delays. "So we meet here, same time, 2 days from now. Once they unload, we hop on, do gear checks, restock, get ready. Any problems?" Murmurs of nope, all good, and Roger that passed through the group. "Second," George continued, "we've got a new greenhorn. Big guy strong. Saw him lift a full crab pot by himself. He's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, so keep an eye on him." The usual chorus of lazy welcomes followed. "Hey, welcome aboard. Strong's good. Saves us the hernias." No one asked his name. On a crab boat, rookies weren't people yet. They were just the new guy until they proved themselves. The fact that he was a mutant? Nobody cared. Not here, not on the deck. Because when you're hauling a half-ton crab pot and the wind's trying to shove you off the side of the boat, the only thing that matters is who can hold the line and who can't. Truth be told, Henry could have lifted that pot one-handed and jogged laps with it. But he looked normal. Human. No reason to out himself, just to show off. So he stood there with the rest of the crew, hands in his pockets, and gave the new guy a polite nod. Another day, another greenhorn, and 2 days from now, another trip into the unforgiving, freezing hell that was the Bering Sea. George wrapped things up with a few quick words, and the group dispersed without much fuss, each man peeling off to handle their own business. As Henry was about to leave, the guild mutant he'd saved last trip slung an arm over his shoulders. "Hey, since we got the day free, want to hit the strip club with us?" Henry blinked. "This early? There's someone already shaking their ass on stage." The young mutant grinned. "During crab season, those clubs never stop. Day or night, there's always someone working the pole. And if you want a private show, there's no shortage of dancers happy to oblige." Henry laughed, tempted for a moment. But buried beneath the Kryptonian muscles was the soul of a wage slave. And that part of him whispered the same thing it always had. Build your war chest first, enjoy later. He wasn't just broke, he was a broke alien. If he wanted to survive in this weird hybrid of Marvel canon, he'd need savings. Blowing cash on lap dances felt like throwing $100 bills into a drain and hoping for a happy ending. Besides, he wasn't naive. Tourist-heavy towns always had one thing in common: tourist traps. And right now, crab fishermen had money, which meant every club, bar, and sketchy backroom will be doing their best to separate the dumb from their dollars. Still, Henry didn't shut him down outright. He put on a show, hesitating, sighing, pretending to be torn before giving a regretful smile. "Not that I don't want to," he said, "but I got some personal stuff to deal with. You know, that whole legal identity situation." The mutant got the hint. He nodded in understanding. America was a land of immigrants, sure, but not all of them were documented. Everyone knew someone who needed fake papers or found creative ways to slip through the system. "Fair enough," the guy said. "You need help, let me know. I got a cousin who knows a guy." "I've got a few leads already," Henry replied. "But if they don't pan out, I'll come find you." Deal. They weren't best friends. Not exactly ride or die, but a shared crab boat was basically combat duty. You worked, you risked your life, you pulled each other out of the ocean if things went sideways. That built a bond, even if no one wanted to admit it. With a wave to George and the crew, Henry headed back to his car. Tom's office wasn't far. Nothing in this town was. Honestly, he spent more time parking than driving. As he pulled up, he noticed the lot had more cars than usual. A quick tap into his super senses confirmed it. Tom had company. Multiple people inside, none of them panicking or shouting. Business, not trouble. Behind the front desk sat the same woman as always, calm, composed, unbothered. She looked like she could crush an IRS audit without blinking. Henry stepped in and offered a polite, "Morning. Is Tom around?" She didn't even look up, just pointed to a sofa in the waiting area. "He's with someone. Take a seat." "Thanks." As Henry walked past her desk, something shiny caught his eye, a handful of gold coins scattered across the surface like loose change. They weren't ancient or worn. No, these were pristine, modern minting quality, high relief, fine detail. But they weren't in protective casings, which was odd. Legit collector coins usually came sealed in plastic to avoid smudging, bending, or scratches. These had none of that. They looked used. Even stranger, the designs didn't seem to match any recognizable nation. No American eagle, no Queen's head, no obvious country of origin. Private minting? Souvenirs? Local currency? Alaska had a history with gold rushes, sure, but carrying unprotected gold coins like pocket change was something else. He stared a little too long. The woman finally looked up and shot him a withering glare. Without saying a word, she opened a drawer and swept the coins in with one clean motion, like they were pennies, not precious metal, which meant either they were fake or she just didn't care. Right? Moving on. Henry took a seat and grabbed a magazine off the side table. It was a real change of pace. John's bar had a TV permanently tuned to the Classics channel, and the only paper he subscribed to was the local weekly, which barely counted. Tom's office was better stocked. Old, but quality, fashion mags, economic reports, a couple of national news weeklies. He picked up a Time magazine from the top of the stack. The cover featured an older white man in a tailored three-piece suit, sharp as a scalpel, with a crisp white mustache and the kind of confidence that practically radiated from the page. Henry had stopped for the picture, but it wasn't attraction. It was the bold headline that got him. The world's smartest man, engineer, visionary, war hero, billionaire. Howard Stark, CEO of Stark Industries. The article praised the man to the skies. Born a genius. Founded one of the most powerful industrial empires in America. Pioneered aerospace, military weapons, and cutting-edge tech. Collaborated with Obadiah Stane to grow Stark Industries into the behemoth it was today. It went further, highlighting how his patents shaped modern warfare, how he'd contributed to the Manhattan Project, and how Stark Industries was involved in nearly every major American operation from World War II to the Apollo missions. The article had the tone of a self-help guru mixed with patriotic myth-making. If it had mentioned him carving fire out of stone or inventing democracy, Henry wouldn't have been surprised. Reading it gave him a weird, grounding feeling. Yup, this really is the Marvel Universe. He'd suspected, of course, but this felt like confirmation. Solid, irrefutable, printed in glossy color confirmation. Only, something felt off. The world didn't seem like the MCU he remembered. There were too many mutants walking around. Too many powers out in the open. It felt like some hybrid of the comics and the films, maybe with a few extra ingredients tossed in just to make things complicated. And that made everything unstable, because Marvel continuity wasn't exactly known for its consistency. Characters got retconned weekly. Timelines rewrote themselves on a whim. And just because he knew something now didn't mean it would still be true tomorrow. And then there was him, the wild card. A Kryptonian in the wrong sandbox. The kind of anomaly that usually made someone up there in the cosmic hierarchy pay attention. Henry flipped the page, pretending to read, but his thoughts were already moving in a different direction. No flashy entrances. No epic speeches. No messing with gods. Let other people chase the power fantasies. He just wanted to survive and maybe, just maybe, enjoy a decent steak and some quiet.